All right, we are now live. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We are, all joined. I have the pleasure of being joined by a friend of mine from school years ago. Her name is Heather. Heather, how are you doing today?
I'm just fine. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So, she's graciously allowed or agreed to come on the show to be interviewed. I love talking about and with people who grew up in the same environment I did of, independent fundamental Baptist movement, going to the churches, going to the schools and everything. And just, it's fascinating to me to see where people end up and their journey along the way. And that's what we have Heather along for today. So we'll begin by asking Heather if you could just introduce yourself, your background, where you grew up, and your familiarity with Christian schools.
Oh, so I grew up in the Ozarks, and that's where I still live now. And I was homeschooled until 7th grade. And my parents used a variety of curricula for those years. I think we started with Bob Jones, and then we transitioned. Every year we did something different. It seemed like, so we did Abeka, we did ACE, we did Saxon, math. I think those are the main ones. I think those are kind of the top three for everybody: Bob Jones, Abeka, ACE.
Right.
And then in 7th grade, I actually went to public school. Street
Scandalous.
Yeah, it was I really expanded my vocabulary that year. And then 8th grade, I went to a Christian church school, an ACE school. And then 9th grade, I went back to public school, and 10th grade, I went back to the Christian school. So for those 4 years, I went to a school like outside of my home. And then the rest of the time after 10th grade, we did ATI for our homeschool curriculum.
That's
So
good.
does that answer all the questions? Oh, and then college, like I went to Maranatha just like you. So
Yeah, we both attended Maranatha in Wisconsin. I was going to bring up, you said you're from the Ozarks. Have you ever seen the TV show Ozark? Did you ever watch that on Netflix?
Oh, I have not seen the entire show, but I've seen like the beginning of it. Yeah. They're appropriating our culture.
It's a good show. I think there are 4 seasons, I think. And the first 2 seasons, I liked everything except the last season. It was great all the way up to the last season, but it's weird because we talked about this before, because we both grew up in Missouri. I didn't grow up around the Ozarks, but I am familiar with Missouri culture, and it's odd that people consider Missouri like to be a southern state when it's not. It's a Midwestern state, but it just kind of borders on the South. And the show kind of like leans into the southern aspect a little more than is actually real in Missouri. I found that interesting.
Well, I don't know. Some people, if you say it's a Midwestern state, they're like, no, it's a southern state. And they get like really worked up about that. Like, I've seen TikToks about that. They're like, oh, you want to be part of the Midwest, but you're not. Our own region.
What the criteria is for a southern state? I mean, I guess it is arbitrary. But
actually, speaking of Christian schools, I had to take state history at the ACE school, and we learned that we were supposed to be part of the Confederacy, the 11 Confederate states, which we had to memorize the names of for some reason. And, we learned that the reason we weren't is because the Federalist troops invaded our state capital and made us join the Union. And we have a star on the Confederate flag because there are 13 stars on the Confederate flag, but only 11 Confederate states. There's one for us and one for Kentucky. So
I didn't know that about the Union invading Missouri State Capitol. I didn't know that. That's
I don't know if that's true, but
it might be.
State history paces.
Yeah, Missouri. So Missouri, for those who know, was a border state during the Civil War, and essentially it meant that it was a northern state, but it still had slavery, which is like kind of a fence-sitting, a weird issue there. But yeah, it does have a star on the Confederate flag. That's true. But yeah, I remember taking government because that was a requirement to graduate from high school in Missouri. I remember that you had to take like a civics government class, whatever. Learned a lot about the Constitution, a lot of the absurdities and everything like that. And when I had completely forgot about Saxon because Saxon for some reason did all the math. I don't know why.
Yes.
I don't know why there was. Yeah, what was up with that?
I don't know. I did not like sex and math. I didn't like any of the math curriculum.
I mean, I sucked at math for pretty much my entire life until I was like 30. So I hated it just because it was math. I don't know, but so when I was a kid, math first started bothering me in third grade. I still remember, like once we got to like long division, once we started learning that, it all fell apart for me. And I'd have to stay in during lunch. During recess, I would have to work on math all the time because I was always bombing it. And for the rest of like my academic experience in high school and college, I always struggled with math. And my dad is a math genius. And so, you know, how it's like when, you know, if Johnny has 3 apples, you know, the whole thing with kids and everything. That's kind of how he was a horrible math teacher, but he was great at math. But yeah, Saxon, did you have any videos for math when you're
No, never had any video at all. And I had friends who got to do a beck of videos, and I was so jealous. Oh, I wanted to do the video school so bad because you got to see the classroom full of children.
Yeah.
There's a real teacher at the front of the room that wasn't your mom. And not that there's anything wrong with my mom, but it seemed so fancy and and like I just wow, I was so envious of my friends who got to do the videos, but no, I didn't ever get to.
That's really funny. Mr. Calvert, I remember, did a bunch of the math, and there was this young guy that did the algebra stuff or whatever, but I hated either way, but that's some interesting stuff. So I've been speaking to Heather over the last few days about her experience, and she introduced me to it was an organization called IBLP. Now, I had heard of this. I had heard of Bill Gothard, but I had never heard the acronym IBLP. And since she's told me about it, I've heard a lot more about it. So if you could give a synopsis of what who Bill Gothard was or is, and I don't know if he's still alive, and what IBLP stands for and what it's all about, if you could.
He is still alive. He's really old now. So IBLP stands for the Institute in Basic Life Principles, and the principles were 7 principles, the 7 basic principles that Mr. Gothard came up with for how you should live your life. And so
he knows because he's the authority on this.
He's the only one who knows too. So it's your lucky day if you get to meet him. And so most people are introduced to IBLP through something called the Basic Seminar. And the Basic Seminar is where you go through the 7 basic principles. You buy a workbook, which has a lot of, text, and then fill in the blank, like places to take notes. And the Basic Seminar is not free. You pay a fee, you go to a church, and I think it was like 3 hours a night for 5 days. And you would sit there in these 3-hour sessions, and they would, when I went anyways, because I was in like the 2000s. Mm-hmm. So it was past its zenith, I think, at that point. It had been around for a long time. So we were watching on a screen videos of Mr. Gothard giving the seminar to like these packed out stadiums. And I think my parents, I asked them when I knew this was coming up, I asked them how and when they got involved in IBLP, which almost is a misnomer because it's not like it's a club or something, but they went to their first basic seminar before I was ever born. So I don't ever remember not
Wow.
a part of IBLP, which being a part is not really the way of saying it. ATI is like a sister organization of IBLP, and you would be a member of ATI. That's their homeschool curriculum, the Advanced Training Institute. But IBLP is just more, it's a parachurch organization. So it's not like a church where you're a member, and it's not like you pay membership dues. It just means like I went to the seminar and I liked the ideas. I probably have some of the books in my home. Like I probably am trying to like live out these teachings in my life. But you don't have to be a part of ATI to be a part of IBLP. You would need to be a part of IBLP to be a part of ATI. I don't know if that makes sense how I'm explaining it to you, or do you have any other questions about it?
No, it's all good. That's all good. It was So I grew up just a standard independent fundamental Baptist, and a lot of our teachings were, in concordance with a lot of IBLP stuff. But from what you've told me and from what I've seen about it in on other sources, it seems like a hypercharged version, even of what we had, or a lot more structured, I would say. That there weren't just guiding principles, but each guiding principle had its own subset of rules that showed you how to operate in these principles. And you told me about a documentary called Shiny Happy People that I don't think I had heard of. I don't like when I hear Shiny Happy People, that's an REM song, and that's what I thought of when you first mentioned it. Yeah, it's a I think it's REM. It's yeah, it is. It's an REM song from the late or early 90s or something like that. But
but I didn't know.
Okay. It's a band. You ever heard "Losing My Religion"? That's a song from way back in the day. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But it's I'll send you a link for REM. You'll see what I'm talking about. But it's that's what I first thought of, and then I watched. I didn't get to finish all. I think it was 4 episodes to it, and at least from what I saw, and I didn't get to finish all 4. I wanted to watch the whole thing before we spoke, but I did get to check out the first 2 episodes, and that was heavy on the Duggar family, which holy shit. I mean, the Duggars were weird to me even back then. It would just seem to, and it's unfortunate because I guess it's not. Whenever I see a couple with just a ton of kids, I immediately think, that's a religious extremist right there. It's the first thing that comes to mind, which is really sad because it doesn't mean that, but that's one of the
probably true.
Yeah, it's one of the familiar markings. It's like, man, like, why do you have 12 kids? This isn't 1898. Like, what's going on here? But and look, if you want to have, here's what I was wondering. I was watching the thing about, first off, the guy's name was Jim Bob. I forgot. Like, come on, are you serious? His name's Jim Bob? Like, this is
he's from Arkansas. So.
Yeah, and so I was wondering. I didn't think I saw in the doc like what he did for a living to like support 20 people. I don't remember. I saw that he
used cars.
Used cars?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't know that much, but I also think they didn't have a lot of financial resources before the show, so I don't know how well he was supporting these.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, like this guy's feeding a small town like by himself. It's just super weird. And then I saw that he served in like the state house and everything, and then the show took off after that and stuff. It was some wild shit on that. And what else did I see here? I wrote down notes on this. I really wanted to speak about this with you. Well, so what was your takeaway from the Shiny Happy People documentary? I didn't put that on the list of questions, but I knew that you had brought it up before. So what are your thoughts on that in general?
Oh wow, I felt so many feelings while I was watching it. Wow, my takeaway. So I guess I felt validated, and I felt represented and seen, because, like, I've gone to therapy, of course, a lot,
Yeah.
As an adult, or like in my work, I'm a musician, and like I'll get a new student and they'll be like, oh, I want to learn how to sing this song. You know this song, right? It's incredibly famous. Everybody knows this song. And you're a music teacher. So obviously you know it, right? Or like just like talking to my peers, they'll be like, oh, you're this old and you're from the United States, you know about this really famous show from when you were a teenager, or this cartoon or whatever. And like, I would always be like, I just would like kind of try to look at eventually, because it's just like too much to explain. I would just kind of try to like look at their faces to figure out like what reaction they were looking for from me. So I just be like, okay, this is a funny thing. Laugh. Or this is probably more serious, like, oh, like, so I know what facial expressions I could just like kind of move on and not be like, I don't know how to explain that I grew up in this weird subculture. It's going to take like a long time, but now I can just say, oh, have you seen Shiny Happy People? And a lot of times people are like, yes. And I can be like, oh, that's how I grew up. So no, I don't know this song that you're talking about. I have no fucking clue. Please just, I promise it'll be fine. I can listen to it and I'll know what to do, but I don't know what it is right now. So yeah, that was a really nice thing. And the Duggars were kind of like that too. Like once they were on TV, I could be like, oh, well, have you seen the Duggars? And people be like, yeah. And I'd be like, that's ATI. So I loved that they're on TV. I loved hearing other people's stories. It made me feel great because I'm like, I wasn't crazy. This was really, really weird.
Yeah. That's one of the more difficult aspects of growing up the way we grew up is I wasn't quite as removed from popular culture as you were. I still kind of kept tabs on everything, but trying to explain to people like the weird setup and everything is just a lot of work. It is. There's just no way you can't knock it out in like a 3-minute speech on it. You got to go on and on and on about it. So it's like I rarely talk like in my regular life. I pretty much never talk about my college experience. I never do because it would be too confusing for anyone, right? Like, how am I supposed to tell a story that, my buddy in college got kicked out because he went to a movie theater? I mean, like, how are you going to, it's like, what? Yeah. It'd be 30 minutes.
They just look mystified at the end, and you're like, never mind. I went to regular college. It's fine. Never mind.
I know, right? Yeah.
It was the same as what you experienced, probably.
Yeah. It's just like boys and girls weren't allowed to hold hands or something like that. It's like you could only hold hands if you were engaged. Like there was like an engaged dating
process you had to go through.
Yeah.
Engagement ring and like all this stuff to get permission to have engaged status.
It was an actual status. Like there were rules to it and everything. And if you went on a date, you had to have a chaperone. You had to bring one of your friends along for your dates. Like it was complete nonsense. And it's difficult to talk to people about it. And one thing that I saw in the documentary that I wanted to bring up was something I believe we discussed before, because hope you guys are sitting down for this, but there's a lot of sexism in the whole, it is definitely a feature, not a bug, but they brought up something that I thought was an interesting point, because it showed that on the Duggars, you had the girls were always doing housework and, washing dishes, and they were always in dresses. They always had long hair. The boys always had short hair, and they were always outside, chopping wood or, mowing the lawn or just like, and it was very gender performative. And then someone like the I don't know if you remember this, but in the documentary, they also showed that the Kardashians are the same way. Like the Keeping Up with the Kardashian show, they are also very gender performative. Like, Kim Kardashian is always just exuding as much femininity as possible, and they're different sides of the spectrum, but it's the same thing. And I was thinking about this. It has not left my mind since I watched the show, is that pretty much all media is like that. The most media is like that, hey, here's a dude, he's a spy, and he's going to be kicking ass. He's going to be knocking chicks down left and right. He's driving a fast car. Or, hey, here's this girl is a model, and men can't keep their eyes off of her and everything. I was like, actually, like being gender performative is way bigger than just like the independent fundamentalist or IBLP. We still kind of haven't grown out of that. So we make fun of them because the gender stuff they're performing is just like an old-fashioned gender performing. But the stuff that we're doing today in modern culture is just a modern version of gender performance. It really hasn't stopped.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, misogyny is rife in our culture. I think our culture at large, it's just worse. And Christian fundamentalism is entirely unchecked. I mean, I think most people in our culture at large, most, not all, but most would say women should be allowed to vote. Like that wouldn't be controversial. Women should be allowed to drive, have a bank account, control their own money, get divorced if their partner is abusing them. But in Christian fundamental, at least in my experience in Christian fundamentalism, like those things aren't always.
So yes, I I talked about this a couple of weeks ago on there's a guy who's running for governor in North Carolina. I think it's Mark Richardson, I think his name is. And he was talking about how, like, something I've heard plenty of times, I'm sure you have, that it's not super important to focus on allowing women to vote, or respecting women's right to vote, because back in the good old days it was one vote per family, and so women didn't worry about, which is is a stupid argument, because all right, well then let the mom vote if that's the case. First off, like, why not? If it's one vote per family, why has it got to be the dad? Second, what about like a single woman? She, like a 45-year-old woman, is still represented by her dad's vote. It doesn't make any sense at all. But it's not an uncommon point of view. Like, I'm not going to say that it is the standard point of view for conservative Christians, like an IBLP, Independent Fundamental Baptist stuff. I wouldn't say it's 53% or something like that, but it's a healthy amount. Like, I say like 25, 30% easily would have no problem if women didn't have the right to vote. I mean, have you seen that in your experience?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a majority, but I do remember that being discussed, particularly at IBLP. And I remember, of course, this is all a really long time ago. But I do remember the discussion that a woman's power is her influence, and that is a different power than what a man has. So like your power is to like influence your husband, kind of thing, and like he'll vote, and like your influence has been like a part of that vote, so you're kind of also voting.
Did you buy that as a kid? Did you buy it? Because I gotta tell you, yeah, even back in my Christian fundamentalist days, that never made sense to me. It never did. It's like, as you're telling me, oh well, you have the power of casual suggestion, and if your husband thinks you're right, he'll agree with you. So okay, well then why not just let them vote? Like, why go through this like ridiculous sideshow of saying, well, maybe you could suggest the person with actual power? And they like to hide behind this paradigm that, listen, men and women, they aren't unequal in our point of view. They just have different roles, and these different roles, like, just happen to be that the men are always the one in the top positions. But listen, for the women who have the lower positions, they're just as important. Don't get us wrong. It's that's what we're trying to do here. And I heard it. I was always kind of like a proto-feminist and like gay rights guy, even back in those days. Like, the fact that like their stringent opposition against like gay marriage never made any sense to me. Like, even I say, look, even if you think it's morally wrong, what do you care if someone else is getting married? Like, why are we having? I remember my preacher always had this thing where he'd say this like once a month. He'd be like, listen, I hate to be a political driven preacher. However, and he would talk about politics all the time, but he would always kind of apologize. I don't try to focus on politics when that's all he did. And I remember this would have been like, I don't know, 2004, 2006, somewhere around there. Missouri, you might remember this. Missouri had this resolution to overturn like this ancient law for the state that homosexuality was illegal. Like, it was actually a crime in the state of Missouri. And so it was put on a ballot measure. And I remember my preacher getting up saying, we've got to oppose this. We have to make sure that it's and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, are you fucking insane? But this happened all the time. I don't know. It was the bigotry against the queer community and against women was just overwhelming. And I say this all the time, that our community was racist as fuck. I mean, it was just stringently racist, but it was way worse when it came to sexism, because they were super open about it. They were kind of casual in their racism. It was still there, but they would kind of dance around it and just find ways to like make euphemisms for it. But when it came to the sexism, it's like, no, women can't be preachers. Women can't vote in church business meetings. Women can't have positions in authority over men. I think you mentioned something like, well, we'd rather not have women leading like songs during the service. Like, they were very open about it. And I don't know how so many women put up with it. I really don't, because it's just week after week just being insulted and telling them you're inferior face to face. It's wild.
It is, but I mean, yeah, your question was like, did it bother me or did I believe it? I did believe it. I believed it was entirely appropriate, and it didn't bother me at all because I knew that was what God's plan for me was, because he had made me a woman and I was a weaker vessel. I would be easily deceived and confused compared to men, because that's what the Bible says about women. And we're the reason that there's sin in the world. So no, I had no problem with any of those teachings. I thought they were true. I believed them. I remember I was a big fan of Elizabeth Elliot, who was a missionary in Ecuador in the 1900s. And I remember her saying on her radio program one time, and I met her one time in person at an IBLP event, actually. She wasn't like a part of IBLP, but, she was obviously on board with their teachings because she was a guest speaker sometimes. But I remember her saying the voice of a woman's father or husband is as the voice of God to her. Because the Bible says if a woman makes a vow, and she obviously is making this vow because she's feeling a conviction to make this vow. So she thinks God is like leading her to make this vow, like say, I vow I'm never going to drink alcohol or something like that. I don't know if you remember this in the Old Testament, like it says, if you're not married, if your father hears of the vow, that first day he hears of it, if he says, no, you're not going to have that vow. Or if you're married, if your husband hears it and the first day he hears it, he says, no, then you're not under that vow anymore.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah, it's a law in the Old Testament, but men don't have that. A man of any age can make a vow, and it's a vow, period. And she's like, I remember her citing that as like, a source text to prove her point that like the voice of your male authority figure, which just depended on your marital status, is the voice of God for you. That's how you know what you're supposed to do. That's how God speaks to you, is through your male authority figure in your life.
Wow. I actually hadn't heard that. Wow. It's weird that I run across stuff that I hadn't heard in the Bible, but that is terrible. I don't know. I saw it all the time. And I think, did we discuss this? So at Maranatha, I remember there was a Bible major, and I think there was a pastoral studies major. And so women obviously couldn't be in pastoral studies because, they can't be pastors in our religion. I'm pretty sure women could have been Bible majors. I don't think there was any restriction against that. I never saw any, but I'm pretty sure Say what?
You could be a biblical studies major. I remember a girl named Jill who was a biblical studies major. She was a music major. That's how I know her, but she was like a double major. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then there was one major that annoyed me to no end, even when I was at Maranatha. And that was this major called church ministries. There was a major in there. Do you remember that?
No, not necessarily, but yeah, I remember taking a women's ministries class. I don't remember what all majors were offered. That was so long ago.
Yeah, well, so this one bugged me because church ministries major was essentially an entire college curriculum, freshman year to senior year, that taught you how to like run church activities. Like you basically, it taught you how to like teach Sunday school classes, how to keep records for the school, like operate a bus ministry or something. It was all shit that you would be better suited just going to the church and doing, instead of spending thousands of dollars, learning how to make a lesson plan for a third grade Sunday school, and it was full of women. It was just chock full of women. And we always joke that was the MRS major. Like that was the major where women like, oh, well, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to find myself a nice man. And then I'm going to get married to him and, study with this degree of questionable use. Like, I don't know what you would do. Like, would I be more, as a pastor, would I be more likely to hire someone with a church ministries major than just someone who wants to work at the church? Like, what do I care? I got to pay one probably a lot more to accept the job. So I never understood that. But just even like what we expected out of women, that it always bugged me. It always bugged me that, like, do you remember we would have altar calls, and there would be altar calls and they would say, okay, if you feel called to go into the ministry, if you feel called to be a Christian school teacher, if you feel called to be a missionary, if you get called to be a pastor, or if you're called to be a pastor's wife, come on down. And I remember thinking as a kid, I was like, how can you be called to be a pastor's wife? What does that mean? Like God is telling me that I need to marry someone who either is or is going to be a pastor. How do you know that's the person you're going to fall in love with? Like, how do you know? Like, that is, it's a goal that has nothing to do with you. It has something to do with the person that you marry. And I don't, by the way, I read the Bible. I don't see any time where God says, I'm calling you to be a pastor's wife. I don't see that anywhere. I see calls to be other things, and I heard it all the time. And it just seemed like a way to include the women. Like, well, yeah, you can't be a missionary. You can't be an evangelist. You can't be you can't be a preacher. You can't be an evangelist. You can't be a missionary, but watch yourself. And but pastor's wife, anyone can do that. So come on down. Do you remember that stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt like that. Like I wanted to be a missionary to China for a really long time. And I mean, honestly, single female missionaries were like the only, maybe at least one of very few options I had for like strong female role models in my life. Yeah. And so like I was a huge fan of like Gladys Aylward and Amy Carmichael and like a long list of other, female missionaries. Like I was allowed to read biographies about these missionaries, and their lives were so exciting and interesting. And of course now I have very different feelings about missionaries and the whole concept of being a missionary.
Yeah.
But at the time, like I was in a different place, and I so admired them, and I felt that I was called to the mission field. I remember saying that, like I had been called to the mission field, and I also remember a feeling at one point, which I'm sure this was just because I had a crush on this boy that I met at Bible camp. But I was like, I think I am called to be his wife.
Oh no!
I can feel the Lord like calling me to be this man's wife, and he was going to be a pastor, and he was like totally sure as well that I was being called to be his wife. Like, so yeah, I remember that, and I do think. I don't know how that first started because I don't remember that ever not being a thing when I was growing up. But I would assume it probably did start as a way of being able to include women, because it's like you can be a missionary, like you say, but it is kind of like,
careful with that. Careful with that.
You probably need a male supervisor because you can't really start a church.
Nope. You can be a missionary by getting a job doing something else, like a nurse or something like that. And then while you're helping sick people, you can tell them about the good news of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But you can't start a church. You can't preach. You can only kind of like one by one strike up conversations with people. And so you were naming off the female missionaries they talked about. I can't remember which one this was, but you may remember, since you remember these folks, but there was a story about this female missionary. She was white, and she wanted to be a missionary to like India or something like that.
Carmichael.
Was it Amy Carmichael? Okay. Yes.
Had to turn her eyes blue, and he didn't. And that made it easier for her to assume brown face so she could sneak into Hindu temples and kidnap children. Which I so admired. I was like, she's so brave.
So for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, I thought it was one of the people you mentioned, as I wasn't sure it was Amy Carmichael, but yeah. So Amy Carmichael was this lady, this white lady who wanted to be a missionary to India, and so she was born with brown eyes, cursed with brown eyes, like for all the people God views unfavorably, and she wanted blue eyes so badly. She and this is the days before colored contacts, so she was out of luck. And so she would pray. There were like stories that they put in our books, and we're reading about, great heroes of the faith. And they talked about how she'd get on her knees, a little girl, and pray every night for God to change her color, her eyes from brown to blue. And God, asshole that he is, ignored every request. He's like, nope. Sorry, you're stuck with the Browns. And she was so depressed, and she ended up becoming a missionary to India in the future. And in order to ingratiate herself in the population, like Heather just mentioned, she would put on brown face, and to like mingle amongst the crowd, like in the temples and everything like that, to talk and minister with people. And she's like, wow, am I lucky that my eyes are brown? Because if they were blue, it'd blow my cover. And this is a story that people talk about all the time, like all the time in the ministry. It was viewed as something like, look how great God is. Like, look how awesome this plan
for her horrible brown eyes, ugly little girl. It's going to be fine for you too. But do you know, and I could be wrong about this because it's been a long time since I read one of her biographies, but I don't think she was just doing that on a daily basis to mingle with the crowd. I think she did assume like Indian.
Oh, like her whole identity?
But well, like I think for like on a daily basis, I think she wore Indian clothes, but she didn't style her hair with the Indian oils that they used. I remember reading because she didn't feel it was very flattering to her look. But she would like make her skin brown and put her hair that way when she specifically went to the Hindu temple because, and I don't know what parts of this are true or not, but this is what I remember reading.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the Hindu temples had children who were prostitutes for the priests in the temples, and that she would sneak in there dressed as an Indian person, and she would kidnap these children to rescue them from being child prostitutes for the Hindu priests. And that's what I remember. And I remember being like just in awe of her bravery. Like that is so scary to do. And that's what most of the female missionaries who were single and didn't get married, they usually were working with children. Like Gladys Aylward, she went to China and she started an orphanage for like the abandoned babies and stuff like that. So that was a way like, oh, if you're a woman, because you can't minister to teenage boys.
No,
but children and teenage girls and women are all up for grabs. So like an orphanage or a children's ministry, like that seemed to be a safe way to go if you wanted to be a female missionary who was single and working alone. So
that's interesting, the part you brought up with the teenage boys thing, because I'd forgotten all about this, but I remember this thought crossing my mind too, that women obviously couldn't preach for the general congregation and they could teach children. But there seemed to be a weird gray area with teenage boys. I remember like that being kind of the thing, because in my mind, it's like, look, you're either an adult or you're not. So why do we care if she's teaching a class of 16-year-old boys? Are they men? Is the Bible? I mean, like, if we're going to go by what the Bible says and that you can't assume authority over a man, well, is a 15-year-old boy a man? The answer is no. The answer is no, he's not. But yeah, it's kind of close. So we gotta train these men to be leaders. It's perfectly. It is perfectly fine for us to have like preacher boy nights where a 14-year-old boy can preach to the entire congregation, but having a 30-year-old woman preach to a 15-year-old boy, out of the question. I remember finding that very strange, because I remember being like 13, 14 years old and actually like giving a sermon to the congregation of a preacher boy group, but a 40-year-old woman could not teach me when it came to Sunday school, which definitely made no sense.
I never thought about that before. That's a really good point. Yeah,
it's weird, right?
100% right. A woman would never have addressed a group of teenage boys, or a group including teenage boys. That would not have been allowed ever.
No. And it'd be it's a weird arbitrary cutoff, because I can see them doing it with like 12 or 13-year-old boys, but definitely like the high school area, when it came, like, there's no way they would teach like a boys' Sunday school class. Like, could not happen. It's like, I don't know, it's weird. It didn't make any sense. But I wanted to go into some of the specifics of this, because these are the most fun things. We already brought up a couple, but talking about, you don't have to limit it to the IBLP stuff if you don't want, but for just in general, what were some of the more ridiculous rules that you ran across during your time with this environment?
So I was thinking through that, and I do have some.
Let's go.
Of some specific rules, but I just wanted to say, like, to me, IBLP, a thing that was really special about IBLP, or maybe unusual, in my opinion, a little bit, was almost like they didn't. So like being an IBLP, like I said, was not really being a part of something. It was just ascribing to like some kind of belief system sort of. So like if I went to Bible camp, or like when I went to Bible college or some special Christian thing, I would usually get a printout with rules that I had to follow.
Yes.
Rules. And of course, the longest set would always be the dress code I needed to follow as a woman to keep my brothers in Christ from stumbling when they looked at me. But I at IBLP and in ATI, I think you did if you joined ATI for that to be your homeschool curriculum, I think you did have to sign a covenant of some kind that said maybe like you wouldn't have a TV in the home except for like educational purposes and like some basic things like no drinking, no playing cards, like stuff, like that maybe. But it's like though I don't remember having like this list of rules we had to follow every day. It was like you just knew. Like there wasn't a rules list, but you knew what the rules were. Like it wasn't like somebody would even say to you, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or you should be doing this. It's like you just knew. And like that was what pulled me in. Like my family actually joined ATI because I pushed for it. Because I was working at this gourd farm, Ozark Country Creations. And it was owned by a family we knew just because they homeschooled, but they were in ATI. So I met a lot of ATI families and went to the basic seminar myself for the first time when I was 16. And I saw these families and, well, you could think of the Duggars. So these families are perfect. Like the children, one of the teachings in ATI is your family should be your best friends. And you don't really need other friends outside of your family. You don't really need a social life outside of your immediate family that you live with in your house. So nobody was saying, what does that mean necessarily as far as like, practically speaking, what does that mean you should be doing? But like, if you saw these families, think of a normal family, you see like brothers and sisters, they're fighting, they're hitting each other, they're arguing, like they don't get along. LP families or like ATI families is not like that. Like you'll see brothers and sisters, like the sister will be like rubbing her brother's back, or she might be sitting on her brother's lap. Or like, I remember seeing teenagers who were siblings, like they'd be holding hands while they're walking around. Like, and same with like parents who have been married for decades and have all these kids, like you go over to their house, the mom's going to like give the dad a like shoulder rub while after she serves him a piece of pie, like she's going to speak to him very sweetly. And, like it's all very perfect and nobody's telling you need to do these things. And all the girls are going to have like really long, pretty hair, like down to their waists. And they're always going to be wearing dresses. And like, there's not a rule, I don't think, that said you had to do, like if you were at a training center, then yeah, there were rules. But if you just saw that and you knew, oh, this is what we're supposed to be. And so you just started doing those things. Like I remember even hearing an adult saying how they had to talk to one of the brother-sister pairs in one of the ministries because they're like, they just love each other so much. And she's always sitting on his lap. And we had to tell them, don't do that when you're in the ministry. It almost looks flirtatious. And, we wouldn't want people to get confused. And they're just so sweet together. So can you imagine that? Like a brother and sister acting like almost like they're flirting with each other because they have so much affection for each other because they are best friends. I mean, like teenagers or like younger than that. Like it's just very unusual. I'd never seen anything like it. And I was totally sucked in. I'm like, this is what my family is supposed to be like. These people are like effortlessly godly. They're like glowing with the light of Christ. And the thing to get my family from where it is now to being like these families is ATI. And so this is what we need to do. It seemed wonderful. But if you ask about specific rules, so those would come into play when you went to what was called a training center. And training centers were these big campuses that Mr. Gothard and his ministry had purchased and turned into like a place where you would go for different retreats and things like that. So my experiences were going to the Indianapolis Training Center, which was people call it Indy. And I went to the counseling seminar there. And I actually homeschooled my younger brother when I was 18. And so I went to like the seminar that parents would go to learn how to teach the curriculum. And I went to the Dallas Training Center for Excel, which was sort of like a finishing school kind of thing. For teenage girls, you had to be 16 to go there. And so I could say some of the rules for those things. So for Excel, that was an 8-week long program, which I desperately wanted to attend so I could learn how to be the best homemaker I could be and learn.
Wait a minute. It was an actual finishing school. Like when you said finishing school, I was like, okay, they said for girls. Like, wait a minute. Like this is an actual like, Jane Austen like style finishing school. Is that really what's? I don't think I didn't know those were still around. I didn't know.
Well, yeah, that's what people would call it. I mean, it wasn't called a finishing school, but that's what people say. It's like a finishing school, but Christian. And yeah, you had to be 16 at least to go there and not married. And you stayed there for 8 weeks. You had a roommate in your room. It was like a dorm kind of situation. And you had a team with a team leader. I think it was maybe like 10 people on your team. So it was a tall building. It used to be a big hotel in Dallas. And there were a lot of stairs. Punctuality was very important. And so that's one thing. Punctuality was very important. So remember that. And memorizing Bible verses was also very important. So, and we had like a lot of lectures we had to attend and take notes. And each week we had a different topic, and we'd have an exam at the end of the week. And the exams were quite demanding. The program was quite rigorous. If you messed up with following one of the rules, you got something called a project. And that was your punishment, but it was called a project. So one of the tasks you had to complete each week was to memorize a scripture passage.
Mm-hmm.
So each day before dinner, you had to recite your daily portion of that passage of scripture to your team leader. And so say the first day, Monday, you had to have 3 verses memorized. Then maybe the next day you had to have 7, and then maybe 10, or, so it built on each other till like by the end of the week, it was usually like maybe a chapter or something like that you had to have memorized. And if any of those days you couldn't verbatim recite all of your verses, you got a project. And the backdrop for how this was, like, in my opinion, this was the worst project. That's why I always remember it. The backdrop is we were indoors all day long, and we got 1 hour a day to go outside for a walk at the park across the street. And there were these animals. It was like it was a park where they had like cabins, like an old-timey kind of village. So there were like these farm animals. It was a really nice place to go for a walk, and I like really look forward to that every day. You could go out on the porch that was enclosed on breaks if you wanted, but it was always really crowded because that was
I'd imagine,
yeah. So I didn't usually go out there, but you couldn't just like walk outside. They said it was too dangerous.
What the fuck? Okay, all right. I've never heard about this. This is I'm like Donald Trump when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. This is the first time I'm hearing about this. I'm hearing this for the first time, but first off, that's prison where you're locked in 23 hours, 1 hour outside. That's exactly what prison is. But I have to pause real quick and ask, what did they teach you at this school? Like, what was the actual curriculum for these 8 weeks? Like, what was it about? I'm dying to know.
Well, let me finish describing the project first.
Okay, all right.
Don't get sidetracked. So I really like going outside. I really like going for walks. And so that was like kind of a hard thing for me, that we had to stay inside all day long every day. I was used to walking around a lot whenever I wanted. I didn't have a car yet. And so that was a lot of pressure. I was always afraid of this project because if you missed your deadline, you had to recite by dinner time. So people would be standing in line in the dinner line trying to recite their verses. And sometimes you would see someone failed and you knew they were going to get the project tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I always felt like I could just like feel my heart sink for them, because it made me feel so bad. And maybe this won't sound so bad to other people, but the project was you had to stay inside during the walk and work on your Bible memory verses, and your team leader also had to stay inside with you and help you. So you made your team leader miss the too, and it was your fault, you know?
Damn.
And yeah, I never missed mine. I always got mine. And those Bible memory was a very important thing to Mr. Gothard. So like I would always have, not even at Excel, but just in regular life, you know, they have these notebooks of 3x5 cards you can buy at Walmart. And I would have those, and you'd write your Bible verses on them. And that way you can carry them around and like flip through and be like memorizing your Bible verses all the time. Like I do it on my paper route in the car. I'd always be like memorizing Bible verses. I had hundreds of Bible verses memorized. But at Excel, they had this amazing idea to sell us these laminated cards with the scripture passage for each week. And they said, you can take these cards and you can stick them on the wall of the shower because the wall will be wet.
Mm-hmm.
Stick the card on there so when you're taking a shower, you can still be memorizing your Bible verses. When you're standing in front of the mirror, like brushing your teeth, stick it on the mirror so you can still be working on your memory verses. And like you can carry it in your hands when you're walking down the stairs. So we had like these laminated cards for each week. I bought those for sure. And another project was those stairs I mentioned before. I don't remember how many floors. It was so many floors. And I think we weren't really supposed to take the elevators for some reason. They wanted us to use the stairs, I think, mainly. I can be wrong about that. But if you, and like I said, the punctuality was very important. Like if you were not in your seat before the lecture was supposed to start, you would have felt very ashamed of yourself. But, and the demands they placed on us were, I have to emphasize, impossible. It would be impossible to fully fulfill all the demands that were placed on us, like to study everything, to be on time, to know all the material. And because we had to be in bed with the lights off at a certain time, like you could not complete everything successfully in the amount of time you had. So that being said, if you got caught running on the stairs, you got a project. Because you should have planned your time more carefully so you wouldn't be late and you wouldn't be rushing. And so if a team leader caught you running on the stairs, you had to walk with the team leader from where you were up to the top floor, back down to the bottom floor, and then back to where you were when they found you. And then you could continue on your way, definitely being late for wherever you were going at that point, probably. So those are the two projects I mainly remember from Excel. And I never did either of them because I was a good girl, you know?
So who would ever want to be a team lead? Like, that sounds like a punishment. Like why would anyone want to be a team lead if anyone fucks up? What do you get out of it, of being a team lead?
It's an honor. It's your ministry.
That's bragging rights. It's like, oh yeah, wow, that's insanity. That's insanity.
No, not bragging rights. Absolutely not. No, it's your chance to minister and to be used by the Lord.
Whew. Wow,
it's a blessing.
Yeah. Do we have any suckers here? Any suckers in the room? Right? Who get this? Yeah. And
it's a privilege to be.
Of course. Yeah. The service alone is the privilege. And I gotta tell you, this sounds a lot like military basic training. A lot of what you mentioned is what they implement a lot in basic training. The impossible task thing is something that they throw at you all the time, because the whole point of basic training is to simulate combat stress and to make sure that you can operate under, incredibly stressful situations and still keep your focus. And so one of the tactics they use in the military is to pile a bunch of tasks on you in a short period of time that would take a superhuman effort for anyone to accomplish. And then when you fail, you still get in trouble. And, you do this over and over again, and they see how well you react to it to see if you can still stay calm, even though you're going to get in trouble. And even I was going to say that the stairs thing reminded me a lot because, you're in the military and in training, you're not allowed to do things like take elevators and stuff. You have to use the stairs. Although not running is something that you run all the time. Like this is, I think, the exact opposite. You are running. In fact, they don't let you walk. If you're going from one building to another, you have to be double timing it unless you're marching in formation. If you're marching that, so people would love to just huddle up at the end of hallways and get like 5 or 6 people. Okay, we're gonna march, because if it was just 2, you had to run. And lights out was the same way. You had to have your lights out a certain hour. But I gotta know, like, what was the?
What were we learning?
Yeah, what was so goddamn important? Like, what were they teaching in this 8-week finishing school?
I don't remember the theme for all 8 of the weeks, probably. I could find out, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But I actually came across my binder not that long ago. It's like this thick, the binder is. Mm-hmm. So each week, like I said, was a different subject matter with an exam at the end of the week. And I remember one week was medical. So we learned about like all the systems in the body, like the endocrine system,
okay,
like the digestive system, like all the, because the idea is you're taking care of your children. And so you need to know, like, food was kind of a big important thing for my memory. Like, there's so much control over everything, what you wear, what you eat, where you listen to, where you go, what time you go to bed, how much you can eat. Just so many rules. Like, we couldn't eat on Sunday at the training center. We had to fast, and we did get to have supper to break our fast at the end of the day, but we had to pray and fast on Sundays. And I was encouraged to fast. We all were, but like, I, of course, being the weirdo I am, was like, okay, this will bring me closer to God. He would make it sound like this was like a way of sort of like getting an extra rub on your genie lamp or something. So like, I would build up to fasting multiple days in a row. Like, and my parents knew, like, at 16 years old, I'm doing this. And like, my parents knew and encouraged me to do this. I remember fasting for 3 days in a row. That's like the longest I could ever get up to, was 3 days in a row. And I passed out. Like, I remember just like crashing through my brother's bedroom door one morning and like being on the floor. And he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just can't stand up for some reason." It's just hard for me to walk right now. So, but anyways, we had to fast on Sundays at the training center. That was a day of rest. So we didn't have classes. We just went to church at this church in Garland, and then we fasted and prayed in our rooms usually. And then we got to have supper. So that was always a really good supper. But so one week we had, it was like, I remember this lady, I think her last name was Cantrell, and she'd written a book. We learned about floral arranging. That was really fun. We learned about sewing, and we had to make a vest that was lined. It was made of tapestry, because, you know, like the Proverbs 31 woman in tapestries. So
oh my God. Oh my God.
We all had a matching that we wore to our graduation, and learning how to line a vest, like, that's really hard to do. And we had, we learned, you know, like about table settings and like meal planning and groceries. And we learned how to change oil in a car one day, which I totally forgot all about how to do as soon as it was over, because it was really boring. But we did. I appreciated that. And I remember I also forgot how to do this, but some man told us how to turn off the water in our house in case ever our husband was gone and like a pipe was leaking. You have to turn off the water so your house doesn't flood while your husband isn't there. And he's like, this is what you do. You find this knob and you turn it, and everything will be okay till your husband gets home. And one week we did the basic seminar, which of course we'd all already done before. But the idea was you do the basic seminar over and over and over again. And there was a choir. We had to learn, like, we had a concert. And I remember one speaker in particular, this man who came to speak to us. And I don't remember. So I'm 16 years old hearing this information. And I just want you to know, when I heard him say this, I didn't question, like, oh, that's weird, or that's not the nicest message to send, or I wonder if that's really true. I was like, oh, yeah. Like, I think everyone in the room was. I know, we were all like, oh, yeah.
I can't wait.
I don't remember what the story was. I just remember the feeling I got when he told this little example that was supporting whatever he was trying to say. So he said he knew this girl who was raped, and she was a daughter still. She wasn't a wife. And she like was just walking down the street, and a stranger like literally jumped out of the bushes and grabbed her and attacked her.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there like horrified. This sounds so bad. And I don't remember why, but the parents had contacted him to ask him something about this situation. And he's like, okay, well, send me a picture of what she was wearing. And he's like, they sent me the picture, and he's like, and it was fine. What she was wearing was totally fine. And I just remember, that's all I remember of the story. But I just remember sitting in my seat, like waiting for him to say what she was wearing and feeling like, and like when he said it was fine, I remember feeling like, oh, thank God. It wasn't her fault that this terrible thing happened to her.
My God.
That it's okay. And she didn't deserve this to happen to her. And that was like a thing in the basic seminar. Mr. Gothard, he would usually, I think every basic seminar, he would talk about getting raped because that was one of the principles was a Christian does not have rights, and anger is something that happens when your rights are violated. But as a Christian, you do not have rights because your rights belong to God. So you do not have the right to become angry. And so one example that I remember him sharing about this is, say you got raped. If you get raped, so also there's this other thing you have to know before I say this. There's like a bullseye diagram in for the seminar, and it shows, because he believed in the trichotomy of man, so like soul, body, soul, spirit, and that each of those three parts were separate but integral parts of being a human being. And so to him, I think it was like body, then soul, then spirit, and spirit was like the core. Maybe I could be getting soul and spirit mixed up, but anyways, he's like, body is the outer circle. It's the least important part of who you are, the least valuable part. It's the part that will not last through eternity. So if you could choose to have any part of your being damaged, which part would you pick? Well, your body, of course, because it's the most easy to recover. It's the least important. And he's like, so if you get raped.
Oh my God. What's with all the rape? What is wrong with these people?
Well, probably because he was a nasty rapist.
Holy shit.
Well, I don't know. It seems like a little debatable if he actually raped someone, but I think he really wanted to rape people. His brother did, I guess. But anyways, so he would say, if you had to choose, I mean, wouldn't you choose for your body to be the thing that was damaged? And so if you are raped, the rapist is harming your body. And you choose how you react to that. And you can choose to allow that experience to like damage the more important parts of yourself, your soul and your spirit. But you can choose to give your rights to the Lord and to allow him to be the one to protect your rights and for him to be the one who gives you justice and forgive your perpetrator if that ever happens to you.
Wow.
And that way only your body is harmed, not your spirit. At least that's what I remember him saying. And I remember, it gives me such a bad feeling. But that was like the prevalent view. But anyways, the answer to the question of what we were learning, and the reason I wanted to go was because you were learning how to be like an excellent wife and mother and homemaker. And the excel is an acrostic for excellence in education, leadership, and education. Excellence in. I have my diploma from it still that Mr. Gothard signed. You'd always get these nice, like high school diploma style certificates in a case at the end of any of his courses. It felt like really special and important that you had finished. So, but yeah, I learned all of these skills. We worked in the kitchen. I think each team worked in the kitchen for at least one meal, so you could learn about like different principles about cooking. We learned about bread making. We learned how to eat escargot, I remember.
Interesting. That's a highfalutin for Dallas, Texas.
You need to use, because like, what if you're married to a senator, and like, also, what do you do? Like, say if you're married to this important man and you have to go to these fancy dinners, and like they're serving wine, like what should you do? And so Yeah.
That's
And
weird.
how to dress so you look attractive as you can look without using any eye traps, but drawing attention to your bright countenance. And so you can look, professional and feminine, of course, but not sexy
Yeah.
and not masculine.
Yeah, definitely not. The so the eye trap thing you mentioned, I was that's actually a phrase I don't think I heard before. I watched it.
Gothard
Yeah.
coined that term.
Say what?
Gothard coined that term.
Okay, because I was watching the
to learn how to spot eye traps in women's clothing. Only women's clothing.
Yeah, I was watching the Shiny Happy People doc, and they showed these people talking about this curriculum they had where it showed a bunch of examples, like drawings of women's clothes, and you had to spot the eye trap.
Yeah, that was a really fun one. I remember like looking at all these different dresses and being like, oh, which one has an eye trap? And being like, oh, yeah, that one. Like, I remember I wasn't allowed to wear ankle bracelets because that was an eye trap. And I really wanted to wear ankle bracelets because I thought they were so pretty, but that wasn't allowed. That was one of the first things I did when I went to college. I bought an ankle bracelet.
So, I'll sidetrack real quick for the ankle bracelet thing. So, at Maranatha, the college we attended, it was also, very gendered in like the clothing and stuff. There were a bunch of rules for the men, but there were like 3 times as many for the women. And they're the rules you'd expect. They had like this weird system for it. Like your shirt must be able to be pulled certain inches from your body. Your skirt has to be so far away from your knee. Your cleavage must be 3 or 4 fingers, stuff like that. But I remember going because I just read through the entire rule book once because and I remember one of the things it talked about was stockings or pantyhose that women wore to class, and one of the rules were that your stockings couldn't have designs on them. Like it had to just be like sheer one color. And it actually hadn't, I'll never forget this, as long as I live, it had in parentheses next to the rule, the reason why. And it said, think about it. Do you want that much attention being paid to your legs? And I was like, that is a weird fucking thing. So like, what are you talking about? And the ankle bracelet thing, that's what reminded me of this because there were rules for the guys' rules were, so the women's rules were basically focused on, not looking sexy. That was it. Like, look nice, look professional, but don't look sexy because that's gonna, destroy the minds of, dudes like me. And for dudes, it was look professional and don't look like a chick. And one of the things that says your hair couldn't be long. That was like the number one thing. Hair couldn't be long, and they were big into like keeping your head, your face shaved because they still thought it was like the 1960s, where if you had a beard that you were some sort of rebel or whatever, some shit. And I remember I had a roommate who got in trouble because he wore an ankle bracelet. And the deans told him, yeah, you can't wear an ankle bracelet. That's for women. Yeah, dudes are not allowed to wear ankle bracelets. That's too feminine. And I remember him telling me this, and I was like, why the hell would you care? Oh yeah. Ankle bracelets, and I think a toe ring. He had a toe ring as well. And they told him, no, and look, I agree. Toe rings are girly as fuck. I openly.
Who the fuck cares?
Yeah, but no, who cares? It's like, yeah, I was like, whether it is or not, it's not. Say what?
Just wear it.
Just let them wear it. Like, who cares? I was just like, I didn't understand, like, just like the minutia that they cared about, like this incredibly mundane shit. They had like dean meetings about and like actual So at the school we went to, their women had to wear dresses or skirts to class. That was non-negotiable. That was happening. Now, women could wear pants on certain occasions. They could wear pants, like say you were out bowling. All right, you can wear pants if you're out bowling. If you're like,
you had to get them approved first.
Got to get approved. And
I had pants to work where I worked, but like I never did because the whole process of getting your pants approved was just way too much.
Yeah,
like, wear a skirt, it's fine.
It saves everybody time. And they could wear pants to like athletic events. Like if the school had like a football game or a basketball game, you could wear like cargo pants to that or something, I think. And or basically any activity where you had to move around, where dresses would be maybe that were wildly impressive.
As a spectator, I don't think.
No, okay, not a spectator. Okay, so anything where you had to like say what?
I could be wrong about that, but I think to play sports, you were allowed to wear, athletic clothes. But I don't think for watching sports.
Okay. And so, but there was a catch with the pants. Well, there were several catches, but the primary one that stood out to me was that women were not allowed to wear jeans. They could wear slacks and they could wear like cargo pants, but they could not wear jeans. That was out of the question. It wasn't happening. And the year after I graduated, that rule changed. And they allowed women to wear jeans, but the jeans could not be blue. They could wear black jeans, gray jeans, like whatever color jean. They couldn't be blue, and which obviously confused people. Like, well, wait, why can't they wear blue jeans? And the official answer given from our administration was, well, when blue jeans were created back in like the mid 19th century, they were the clothes that were worn by men who worked in the mines. That was like their kind of uniform, and so we believe that blue jeans are inherently masculine, but black or gray or green or purple jeans are perfectly fine. And I said, I can't believe like a room full of grown ass adults banged out this rule. Like, yep, this makes sense. This is certainly logical and reasonable, and no one will think. I don't know if the rule's still this way to this day. I mean, it's 20 years ago, so I doubt it hasn't been up.
Girls wear pants on campus now.
Oh, outrageous!
Not that long after I graduated, I was like, what the hell? Like, not that I cared. I didn't wear pants really anyways. But I'm just like, what? This school has gone to garbage. Like,
yeah, I know, right?
Like, you can just do whatever. It's a free-for-all now.
It's you know what? Go ahead.
I never heard that about the minors, but you know what I heard? Because I asked that same question. Because even for me, it's like the blue jeans thing was a little like, why does it matter what the material of the pants is made out of? But somebody told me it was because of hippies, like hippies blue jeans or something.
Oh, come on.
And that was where it came from.
That doesn't make sense.
Because I think it was Dr. Wentz maybe in his class. He said maxi dresses used to be against the rules when the school first started. And he's like, and why would that be? And it's because of like what was associated with that item of clothing. It was part of the hippie movement. And so like now it doesn't really matter because that item of clothing no longer carries that connotation. So it's fine. Or so who knows?
Well, that would make the blue jean rule make less sense then, because everyone wears blue jeans. Like, it's not associated with any group.
I think they were saying like original, like I think the school was founded in 1968, maybe. And so I think at that time the hippie movement was probably still
right
a thing. So I think some of what they were doing was a reaction against. So maybe that's why the rule started, and that it just, of course, like anything in Christian fundamentalism, takes forever to go away. So.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, I just don't understand why they broke with the jeans rule for the color. That part doesn't, yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know. That rule in particular, I think, I remember asking about that too, because that rule was like maybe the most asinine rule of all.
That's like, it's like Lord of the Rings, like the one rule that's the worst of all. But the one that really got me was, remember the movie theater one. The movie theater one, and a lot of people would call them movie houses. I remember that. Like a lot of the preachers would call them movie houses. Like a phrase I only heard in church where they call it, or church related instances. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why. My church that I went to before Maranatha, they look down on going to movie theaters too. Like, you can watch the movie at home. That was fine. There was nothing wrong with that. Going to the theater,
you're not going to lose your testimony, TJ.
Well,
that's why.
All right, so I'm interested with you, because it took me a while to like dig deep into this, because I couldn't for the life of me understand like how going to a movie theater is bad for your Christian testimony. I guess if you're going to watch,
nobody knows what you're going to see. Someone could see you, and you could be going to see an R-rated movie for all.
You could, yeah. If you went and you like you saw, I don't know, Bikini Babe Chainsaw Massacre 5 or something, and someone saw you walking out. Okay, but I mean, you don't know what I'm watching at the theater. Like, you don't know what I'm doing anytime. And so, but talking to more and more people, I kind of realized that, at least in college, whenever they would talk about this, is they would say, well, you know what happens in movie theaters, right? Teenagers go there and they canoodle. They canoodle with each other, and so I think that's what they were kind of trying to get away from. Oh, looks like we lost Heather. Well, folks, I'm sorry you're stuck with just me. you have a question or something, let me know. I'll try to answer it. But while we're waiting for Heather to come back, the movie theater thing was pretty odd. There were a lot of strange rules. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Yeah, guys couldn't have beards. Facial hair was looked down upon. We always had to. We had like a dorm lock. You had to be back in your dorm by 10 p.m. Otherwise, you get demerit. Oh, you had a demerit system. You got so many demerits, you got kicked out of school. It was kind of a. I guess we'll take Heather off here until she gets back. Wait for her to get back on. Too broke to fix and daddy get you gone. I'm missing my baby. Oh, did she text? Oh, her battery died. Well, we'll wait. We will wait. It's always acting crazy. Oh, there she is. All right, cool.
Battery died.
Yeah, I just saw that text. Yeah, welcome back. Welcome back. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, like that's why, because the teenagers do a little hanky panky, and that's why you might be getting busy in the movie theater, as everybody does when they go to a movie theater. And like you said, a lot of the rules were based on shit back from the 1950s that just still carried over, and everyone like treated them like gospel. I wanted to mention a couple of things you brought up about your finishing school. First, when that guy came in and taught you guys, well, here's how you turn the water off. That's actually a good lesson. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a good idea. But he had to add the addendum. Well, in case your husband's not around. It's like, okay, just teach him how to do it. That has nothing to do with whether your husband's around or not. You're perfectly capable of turning a knob to stop a leak. That's not a male specific task. The choir.
It was in our framework, though.
Right.
It totally made sense for him to say that. It's like, that's the only reason I would need to know. Same with so literally, TJ, I did not know how to put gas in my car. Yeah. I
mean, you have a good idea, I'm sure, right? You saw, I mean, it's not
kind of, but my dad was pretty big on independence. I worked and I had jobs, which was a little bit controversial because a lot of people believed in stay-at-home daughters, but my dad didn't. So I worked and earned money. So I had my money and I got a car, and I would give the money to my brother or my dad, and they would take my car to the gas station and fill it up with gas. So I knew you went to the gas station and it had something to do with the gas pump, and he told me, you don't need to know how to do this. You don't need to know about cars because your brother and I will take care of that for you. And then after we're not taking care of it for you, your husband will take care of it for you then.
He said this out loud? Like that was
Yeah, of course.
Wow, man.
And so I remember the first time I went to a gas station, I was by myself with my car, and I had to get gas for my car because I was out of gas. And I was just standing at the pump, and I was like, this probably makes me sound really stupid. But if you think of never having done it before, there's so many buttons, and it's I remember I was pushing all these buttons, trying to make it work. And this lady came up to me. She's like, do you need some help?
Oh, no.
Yes. What do I do? I know how I've got it all figured out
now. Now you got it down. I can pump gas like nobody's business these days.
And it was with dating, because courtship was a big thing in IBLP. So I remember way before I ever would have been old enough to have a boyfriend, I was told, if a boy ever asks you to be his girlfriend, you can't say yes and you can't say no. You have to tell him, you'll have to ask my father. And they made me practice saying, you have to ask my father.
Because women are things. Women are property. Yeah.
And they would. Once I was old enough. Okay, so when I went to public school, this little boy, before I learned better, he did ask me to be his girlfriend, and I made the mistake of telling my dad, I'm like, I'd really like to have a boyfriend. Can I please be this boy's girlfriend? He went to the school the next day and made this little boy shit his pants, I'm sure. So he could tell this kid, you can't date my daughter.
we're like 11 or something. I don't know, 12 probably.
Oh my God. Oh, you're 11. Oh, come on. Oh no.
It was summer school before 7th grade. So however old that is.
Oh no.
We were very young. And so then, but when I was a little older, like 18, he would let boys take me out to like dinner or give me a ride to prayer meeting or give me a ride to choir practice at church. And but they wouldn't ask me. They would call and they would ask my dad. And this was just an independent fundamental Baptist thing. They weren't in IBLP, but they all knew, like we all were on the same page. They all knew. They never asked me. Why would they bother asking me? And so my dad would be like, oh, Adam's going to take you out for pizza tonight before church. So be ready at this time. Or whatever. And he did ask sometimes, do you want to go? And I'd be like, yeah, I'll go. Sure. And so those boys in their cars, they sometimes would do things like take a wrong turn to make the ride last longer, because that's the only. And I was surprised. My dad would let me like ride alone in the cars with them. But I think because he knew they would never have tried. Nobody ever tried anything with me other than holding hands. I did give in and hold hands with like.
Damn.
I know. And I would always get really under conviction about it. I'd be like, you need to stop. My dad specifically said no hand holding. And here we are holding hands like wanton sinners. And now I probably will have to marry you because no one else will have me. So, because I'm already holding
I'm ran through. My hands have been held and used up. Yeah, God, yeah. The weird fascination with and this isn't just like, it's just a hyper version of kind of like culture in general, where this psycho obsession with your daughter's sexuality, like it's very creepy and very weird. That not just like, because of course, like, yeah, there is a responsibility as a parent to make sure that your child, male or female, is not being sexually exploited. Like, of course, that
was not a concern, really. Not really. Why would you be teaching people those things about rape if you were concerned about sexual exploitation?
No, well, I mean, you're concerned that like you don't want someone who has obviously ill intention around your child or something like that. But you don't want anyone around your child. It's like, hey, listen, this girl literally belongs to me. And even like you see, you go to pick the girl up for a date, the guy stand there with a shotgun and shit like that, or whatever you do to her, I'm gonna do to you. It's like, it's just weird. Okay, so you want to fuck this boy now? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, it is weird shit that it's just and the weird. Now, we never did this. We never did like the like daddy-daughter balls where you promised your virginity to your father or something like that. I've heard of this, but we never did that at our church. Even we would have found that a little bit creepy. Although we did have like pledges to your virginity. Like, yeah, kids would go up and they would sign a card saying I will remain a virgin, stuff like that. I've gone on this speech many times about how shielding kids from the reality of sex is the worst thing you could do. It is the absolute worst thing you can do, because if they don't find out this shit from you, or they don't find it out at school, where are they going to find it out? They're going to find it out from strangers or other kids or porn. It's like, no, you just structure this shit so they know what they're talking about. The earlier, the better. And I forgot, I mentioned another thing, but this went in line with shutting off the water. Learning to change your oil. I was very surprised they taught you how to do that, because it is a good it's something good to learn, but I wouldn't recommend anyone change their oil. Like, it takes so long, and it's like $40 to get your oil changed. Like, it is well worth that than putting the pan under and draining it. It takes forever. I haven't changed. I know how to do it, but I haven't done it in years. Learning to change a tire, though, is a lot more important. Did they teach that? Because that's something.
I have a bad story about changing tires.
Let's go. Let's go.
Not from Excel. This was when I was in college and I was living with my horrible 3 boy cousins.
I know two. I know 2 of them. Like, I interacted with them. The third one, I can't remember his name. It was Jeremy. Nick. I remember Nick. He was younger. So I remember seeing him, but I never really talked to him as much as I did to Jeremy or Andy. But yeah, Heather was mistreated very badly by her cousins. They tricked her into watching a scary movie and then leaving the room, so she was all alone. It was horrifying. But yeah, let's hear the tire changing story. I got to hear this one.
And they were proud of it. They had no shame. So I had I'll tell this whole story, even though this is another thing that kind of makes me sound dumb. But it's not that I was dumb. It's just I was untrained, you know?
Yeah.
So I was driving around Watertown, where our college was, and I kept hearing this strange, loud sound while I was driving around. And I thought I must have like run over a tree branch, and I was like dragging a tree branch around or something. And I kept meaning to check, but I kept forgetting once my car was stopped. And so finally, when I got back home, my cousins were like, "You have a flat tire. Why have you been driving around on a flat tire?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know. I thought there was a tree branch under my car." And they're like, "No, it's a flat tire and you have to change it." And I was like, "I can't change a flat tire? What?" And they made me change that tire myself. And I couldn't get the lug nuts off, even like standing on the thing. They're so hard to get off.
Yeah.
Stood there. They wouldn't help me at all, except with the lug nuts. And they made me do like the jack thing. They made me do the whole thing all by myself. So I did change a tire one time, but I don't remember how anymore. That kind of thing. Like, just hire a professional. Man or woman, I don't need to know that. Come on.
I don't know. So I remember when I was always amazed when I ran across people who didn't know how to change a tire. I was amazed. I mean, if no one taught me, say what?
Be amazed.
Well, yeah.
I don't know how still, even though I did it once.
Here's how I thought of it is that I remember like when I was 15 or 16, probably before that, I remember mom and dad teaching me how to change a tire. They said, "Okay, you're going to be driving pretty soon and you might get a flat tire. You need to know how to change." It just seemed like the responsible thing to do. Like, yeah, if it happens, like you should be prepared for it. And this is the days before cell phones. So, if you had a flat tire, you were shit out of luck. You needed to change the tire then. And so when I got to college, I said, "You guys been driving for like 3 or 4 years and you don't know how to change it?" It happened all the time. That was wild, but I don't know. And another thing I wanted to bring up was the choir. I wrote this down just because you had 8 weeks and you put together a choir. That had to be horrible. That had to be like, I mean, how good of a choir can you build in an 8-week period? I mean, just to teach everyone like to sound nice. That's just, it's possible, but it wouldn't be optimal because there's no guarantee you have a lot of good singers there at all. You just, you're singing for the joy of singing. But it reminded me of a story of when I was in, warrior leader course. It's basically the first course you take before you become a sergeant, and it's a prerequisite. And I remember like we had these classes and everything, and there was this one class where the instructor had this big, like huge bucket full of candy, and I heard about it, and as did other people, and they would sneak away to this classroom like during their breaks and like, "Hey, let me get some of that candy." So little did I know it was a trap because I walked in and I was like, "Oh yeah, can I get some candy?" And so the instructor's like, "Sure," and then he closes the door, and like it's just me and the instructor and all of his students. He goes, "All right, you have to sing the Army song. Before you get the candy, you have to sing the Army song." And so I was like, "Okay, all right." So I sang it. And I got some candy. He goes, "All right, thank you for that." And then someone came to me like the next day. It's like, "Okay, you've been chosen to sing the national anthem at graduation." Basically, what the trap was to get people to come in. Yeah, they were trick. Yes, they were trick auditions. They would get to find out who could sing, and then I walked right into it. And so I ended up having to sing the national anthem, which is but the national anthem is a brutal song to sing. It is one of my least favorite songs. It is terrible. Like it is like that it's all clunky and truncated. It barely rhymes. It has that really weird high part with the free. It is a tough song, and I hate it so much. But yeah, I got trapped into doing that. And you mentioned one thing too about body, soul, and spirit. I remember this confusing me a lot in my younger days. And I was like, okay, what is the difference between soul and spirit? Like, please tell me, like, how are these two different entities? It never made me sense to me, even back then. And these days, I'm like, oh yeah, it's well, first, I don't think either of them exist. It's just your mind, and that's it. And also, your mind is not separate from your body. Like, we don't have bodies, we are bodies. Like that's what this entire thing is. It's all, none of this exists without your brain. And we go through a lot of trouble trying to separate the two when they are one and the same. It's that is some pretty wild shit. That was yeah, that was, man, the rules back then were so weird. And the gender dichotomy too really bothers me. And it bothered me it bothered me more that so many women were cool with it. That's what really, or not surprised me. It surprised me how many women were cool with it. And like you said, like you're taught this your entire life, and you're just like, okay, this is fine. This is just how it is.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Like, okay, so the thing that surprises me is not someone like me believing, because I was taught from the time I was born, not with words, but I was taught before I was born. My parents were reading the Bible to me in the womb. They told me that all the time. Like, I was taught that I was inferior to a man. I had less value than a man, and I would need a man to get through life. And that my highest purpose in life would be caring for a man and helping him become the best thing that he could be in life, you know, supporting him. That's my role, is to support. So if you're told that like your whole life, and you believe it, and you believe you're going to have a rebellious spirit, and you need to always be trying to tame your tongue and speak sweetly and making your body joyfully available to your husband, and like all these things, and submit to your male authority figure, it's like none of that seems weird to you, because it would be weird to believe anything else. Everybody else is reinforcing it. They all believe the same thing. Whenever you hear that belief challenged, you're like, well, that's just the spirit of rebellion in these feminists.
Yeah.
They don't know that they really are not as happy as they would be if they just learned about the biblical rules of submission. And then they could fulfill their true life's purpose, finally. I feel so bad for them. But with their careers, they must be so tired. But like, the thing that bothers me is like someone like, and I don't mean this as an accusatory thing towards my mom, but say someone like my mom who was not raised that way.
Yeah.
And like, she went to college. She was allowed to go to, I had to fight to be able to go to college, because my dad told me a woman does not need to go to college, because she does not need a bachelor's degree to be a wife and mother. And if she spends that time and money earning a bachelor's degree, that's going to make her rebellious against her role as a wife and mother and against her husband, because she's not going to want to stay home and take care of her home and family and her husband, because she's going to have a career with this degree she earned. So a woman doesn't really need to be going off to college. But like, my mom had a bachelor's degree. Her family was Democrat when she was growing up. And she went to Peace Corps, and she like went to Europe to study art. Like, I think she was kind of a hippie, it sounds like. She won't tell me much about her past, but it's like that. And so I always am so confused. Like, how do you go from that?
Yeah.
And say, oh, this man is going to tell me what to do. I will have no financial independence. I will be completely dependent on this man for anything I need to purchase, in life. I will have $0 to my name. If I want to go buy like a candy bar, I would have to ask for the money from my husband, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And like, if my husband doesn't like something I'm doing, he can tell me no, and I can't do it. And he can tell me, you can't wear that, which still happens to this day. Like, I'll always try to get my mom to wear some cute thing, and my dad will be like, oh, that's too tight. She can't wear that. Or, you know what I mean? Like, he'll like veto clothing choices for her still. And they're in their 70s now. So.
Wow. Yeah. That's the thing with the
not
clothing.
only am I going to choose that for myself, but that's what I want for my daughter. I don't understand that. It's like,
yeah.
How does that happen? I don't understand that.
Yeah. That that I don't know, that idea is like, yeah, it is strange to me. Yeah, you're gonna tie yourself, your entire life will depend on one person. What if the relationship doesn't work out? What if the guy just dies? Like, what do you do then? I mean, like, there's no plan B on this shit, and it's weird that people are just, well, I guess if you have trust in God, that He'll take care of you, then it's all gonna be fine. Why bother worrying about it? I'll tell you one thing. This is like kind of a side note. You mentioned where your dad was saying, "Hey, don't wear that. That's too tight." I've never understood this. I've never, because this isn't limited to like, Christian guys, whatever. A lot of dudes are like this. It's like, well, my girlfriend going out wearing something tight or revealing, I couldn't imagine carrying. I couldn't. I couldn't. It's just like, hey, well, with a cat, like, you look nice and you look kind of sexy. And to me, saying you can't wear that means that all that tells me is that, okay, she's going to get attention from other guys, and you are not confident enough that you are enough for her. Say what?
Yeah. You're not confident enough she's going to go home with you at the end of the night.
Yeah. It's like you either lack confidence in yourself that somehow you're not man enough for her, or that, you won't be able to satisfy her, something like that, or you just don't trust this person. Like, this person is untrustworthy. Either way, maybe you guys shouldn't be together. Like maybe you shouldn't. Like that's how I look at it. That if I don't trust the person I'm with, or if I'm not secure enough in myself to worry that she'll find someone better than me, why are we together? Like why bother with this whole charade? Is this pretty weird? But another thing I wanted to ask is, so we talk about all the weird shit and everything we endured. So you accepted this? Like, I accepted most of it too. I mean, I was on board. I can't be holier than thou here. I went to the Christian school, but when did the first cracks in the armor start? Like, when did it say, okay, now there's no like one point I'm sure anyone can point to where they're like, okay, this is the moment where it all collapsed, but there's a succession of them, and then one that kind of, really brought it to light. Like, can you name one or a couple of those?
Sure. So if I'm just talking about like Christianity as a whole, as opposed to, I'm not like, I don't have a really good, like, exciting answer for this question, which kind of bothers me. But for me, like, I still am kind of like a closeted person or something. Like, I'm not, that's the reason I didn't want to use my last name. Of course, it's like people in my life don't know that I don't believe in these things anymore. I'm not public about that at all. In fact, if anything, I try to kind of like tacitly send the message that I still am totally on board. I go to a Southern Baptist church, which is a lot more laid back. And that way I can say I go to church. I go there enough to be able to say I go to church. And I never was like, oh, I've deconstructed, or I've deconverted, or I'm in the process. I've never done that. It just is inside of my head only, and it's very gradual. But I would say, I mean, really in childhood, it started. I remember asking questions like, well, why did all of the Amalekites have to be slaughtered? And like, why did the pregnant women have to be ripped up and have no pity on them, and the old men and the children? And like, why was it okay to enslave these people? And why was it okay for these virgins to be married off to these men, like whether they wanted to be or not? And like, why is it okay that King Solomon had 1,000 wives and we only can have one wife and one husband now? And like, all of these questions and like, free will of man versus God's sovereignty, and like just all the different contradictions that you come across in the Bible, and things that don't make sense, logical fallacies, like just and antiquated ideals, and like the rules, like why is it fine for us to eat shellfish now, but still cross-dressing is sinful, and tattoos are sinful, or like, even though in the same exact chapter it says to observe the Lord's Supper, it also says not to cut your hair if you're a woman, and that you should have your head covered. Why is it that the Lord's Supper is a transcendent principle we need to follow, but the hair things are just like a cultural? It doesn't apply to us. So and same in like in Peter's epistle, where it says, don't wear gold and jewels and costly array, and don't braid your hair. Like, that's a very clear, direct instruction. Like, why are we ignoring that? Like, so those inconsistencies really bothered me as I was growing up. Even I remember, like, in very young Sunday school classes asking questions about that, probably by the time I was 7 or 8. But the adults and like praying, like, how do you know you're hearing God's voice? That was a question that really bothered me. And I remember the adults would always just kind of explain away the answers. And the answer that they would say about all the Old Testament genocide, which Jehovah not only condoned but commanded, was
we lost Heather again.
Oh, you lost me?
There you go. I lost you for a second.
So I remember asking the question about all the genocide that Jehovah God commanded and condoned, demanded, in fact, of his people, and being like, why? Why was this necessary? Why was this important? And I don't know if they said this to you or not, but they would always say, oh, this was to teach us a lesson. This had to happen so we could from it now as Christians in modern times or whatever. That, I don't know. Did you ever hear that answer? Because I heard that over and over again growing up.
So I asked a lot of these same questions, and when it came to the genocide question specifically, so for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, there are several passages in the Old Testament in which after Moses leads the Hebrews out of Egypt, they wander for 40 years, and then they start the conquest of Canaan, which involves them conquering city after city after city until they control the whole land. And God would instruct the Israelites to, all right, go to war with this town. And he would tell them in explicit detail, kill all the soldiers, don't take any prisoners, go into the city, kill all the men, kill the women, kill the children, kill the old people, kill the fucking animals. I mean, it is horrifying. And this happens many times. And Heather mentioned one story in which Moses, not Joshua. Moses tells them, hey, the Lord has instructed me that we're going to war with the Amalekites, I think. I can't remember which one.
I think the Amalekites was the really bad one. Because it wasn't always. Sometimes they were supposed to spare the animals or spare the virgins. It wasn't always the same instructions. Yeah, you're all explaining this. I forgot, like, not everybody's going to know what I'm.
Oh, that's all right. So with I think it's the Amalekites. I can't remember, but it's in the book of Numbers. And Moses tells them, hey, here are the instructions from God. Very clear. Go in there and wipe everybody out. Kill everyone except for the virgin girls. And then he says, them you can take for yourselves. Those were the exact words. And so I think I can't remember what percentage of them, however many thousands of virgin girls there were given to the Levites, which were like the priestly tribe, and they had to be the Levites. And then the rest of them were essentially sex slaves. I know what this means. You can say whatever you want, but first off, how do you know who's a virgin and who's not? You don't. And so what it really means is like the girls like 15 and under probably is what it means. It's like the young girls that are they're your property now. You just got to, and so they would dodge and say, oh yeah, well, they just married them. Okay, so you're telling me that you're a 15-year-old girl in the Middle East, someone comes in, murders your entire family, and you think that it's a blessing that you get to marry this person after they've wiped out everything you've known and loved? They would try to dodge it around that way. And it's funny you mentioned the animals.
If someone raped you, his punishment was he had to marry you.
Yes, there's
more of a punishment for you, not for him.
Yeah, one of the laws this is why it's funny that they always refer to the Old Testament law as this unattainable moral standard. That's why we needed Jesus to come for the blood sacrifice, because we couldn't possibly live up to the morality of the Old Testament law. Let me tell you the Old Testament law. Like, one of them is what Heather mentioned, is that if a man raped a woman, first off, if she didn't cry out for help, it didn't count. It's like, oh, well, then how do we know you didn't really, you weren't asking for it? And so God apparently is unaware that, women don't always cry out whenever rape is out of fear. And then let's say that you did rape someone. The crime wasn't against her. The crime was against her father, because once again, women are things. Say what?
Or her husband.
Or husband, yeah. So if you rape someone, you had to pay a fine to her dad, or however many pieces of silver or gold or whatever, for punishment for the crime. If you didn't pay that fine, she
had lost all her value to him.
Exactly. So you
couldn't get anything from her now.
You were forced to marry her because now she's a depreciating asset. Because and also, if you got married and you consummated the marriage that night, and there's no blood, which like proof that she's a virgin, you can have her executed. You can have her executed because she didn't happen to bleed the first night. This is God's perfect law. Like, this is the law that's set in a place that so morally high we couldn't live up to. It is insanity. The what I write down here. Oh yeah, so back to Yahweh and the genocide and everything. A lot of things in the Old Testament start to make a lot more sense when you actually learn history. Like because reading the Old Testament, this shit makes no sense at all. Because I know you remember thinking about this with the Israelites. So you have capital G God who comes in and talks to Moses and Aaron and has them do all these miracles, conquers the gods of Egypt. He turned the entire sky black for I forget how many days, turned the mighty Nile River into blood. I mean, these wild, insane miracles to save your people. And then you leave, and within a matter of months, you're ditching him to worship the rain god. It's like, what? Why? Why would you do something like that? You have the Lord.
It's so frustrating. It's like, what are you thinking, Jewish people?
That never made any sense at all. And then you actually learn about the history that these people were polygamists. Like, the entire society of the Near East was a polygamous society. It's why the Ten Commandments say, have no other gods before me, because they believed in other gods. Like, all the patriarchs were like, so you had Abraham, who made God was his Elohim, which we all use as a name for God. And really, Elohim just means that is your chief god. Like, you had El Elyon was part of the pantheon of gods back then. So was Baal. So was Asherah. So was like Moloch. Like, people that we all are guys that we all saw as false gods. No, they were just other gods in the club, along with and an interesting member of this pantheon is Yahweh, because Yahweh and Elohim are not the same person. They are different gods. And so that's why whenever you're reading about the conquest, they're always talking to Yahweh, because Yahweh was a war god. Yahweh was like their version of Mars or Ares. And it's why he's so goddamn fascinated with blood. It's why every time you see them talking to Yahweh, it is Yahweh got mad because he instructed Saul to go to this town and kill, once again, leave nothing alive. And Saul does pretty much that, except he kept some animals alive for sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And Samuel comes up to Saul, is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, Saul got in trouble because he didn't kill enough. Like, he lost his job for it. And like, that is how. And so you had this.
God is better than sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the lesson he learned.
That's what he learned. Yeah. And you have like these people. They were polytheists, very obviously, but then they became not necessarily monotheists, but like monolateralists. They believed in many gods, but they thought there was one God that was better than the others. And that became Yahweh, and the same Yahweh that we know today. And they incorporated all the other names for God with them, like Elohim and stuff, and pretended they were the same the entire time. And with women, also interpreting the Bible, when you said that, this is a great example you brought up about how come we can eat shellfish? That's perfectly fine. But, sex with a man.
Fibers.
Say what? Yeah, mixed
fibers.
Yeah, guys, there's some weird rules in the Bible. There's some weird fucking rules, man. Like
cheeseburgers.
Yeah, and they
meat and dairy product.
Meat and dairy product. Yeah, and like there's like they focus on like once again obsessed with sex, obsessed with it. And so like in the same chapter where it says that a man shall not lie with man, like, okay, that's illegal. Same chapter says you cannot mix fabrics. We have no problem with that. Or we eat shellfish like it's nobody's business. Like we only like pick and choose certain rules to follow. And this applies to the New Testament as well. And this is something that I brought up a lot when I was younger, is that there's very clear examples of what salvation is. Very clear examples. And they contradict a lot of times. And whenever Jesus was doing his ministry, there's this story about the rich young ruler. And that story has a young man who's rich, and he comes up to Jesus and he says, Rabbi, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus said, well, first you have to, love God with all your soul, all your mind, all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, and keep the commandments. And he says, I've done that. Like, I have good news. I've done all of that. And Jesus says, all right, one more thing. He's like, one tiny more thing. I need you to sell all your shit, and I need you to give it to the poor and follow me. And the ruler said, okay. And so the ruler, he refused to do that, and he walked away. And then people would read this passage in church. It was like, okay, that doesn't actually mean you need to sell all your stuff and walk away. This is just showing a lesson that he loved his property. Where he's like, well,
it was because he knew that this rich young ruler like had that problem. He had put those things before God. It's not like a universal principle for
Yeah. Never mind. That's not what the Bible says. You just made that up. That's not there at all. And second, and even more importantly, everyone else did exactly that. Like when you look at Jesus' disciples, that's what they did. They sold their shit.
Ananias and Sapphira, like there's so many examples of the communism in the Bible.
Yes.
That's like okay in the ACE Paces. I don't know if you remember that. Like I remember there was specifically a section about communism in the early church and how communism was not meant for now, and it was only allowed then. And I don't remember all the reasons, but it was like it was temporary was one of the really big reasons. It was just limited time only.
Yeah, right. Yeah, special edition Christianity. Yeah, it's like it's just. Hey, all the shit that's actually in the Bible, it's like, oh, we can't do that. Not that
part.
Yeah, not that part. Just ignore that shit. But yeah, this happened all the time. And I forgot what even brought this up. I had this written down. I think you were talking about the leading of the Holy Spirit.
What brought the first cracks in the army was the original question. I don't know.
No, but I was like, I wrote down something. I can't remember what you said that reminded me of this, but I remember now. You were talking about leading of the Holy Spirit. And this is something, once again, like this, a lot of this goes back to just being a kid and just looking at the absurdity of this. So we would have, I don't know if you were allowed to attend church business meetings. Now I think about it, like, why would they, did you ever do that?
Yeah, women could attend the business meetings.
Okay.
And in fact, I think women might have been able to even ask questions because it wasn't a church service and vote, maybe.
They could vote?
I couldn't speak to that for sure. It's been way too long.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure women didn't vote, but I don't know if that was because it wasn't like a you raised your hand. That's how you voted. Yeah. So maybe they did vote, maybe they didn't. But I remember this would happen all the time. And once again, high schooler, and not a particularly bright one either, the TJ. So I'm sitting there and we had this church business meeting. It's like, okay, so the pastor would get up and he says, okay, the deacons and I have talked amongst ourselves and we have this proposal to buy this tract of land or to, upgrade the plumbing or whatever the issue was with the church. And it's going to cost, $10,000 or whatever. And they say, so, we need church approval on this. And so this is the plan. This is the cost. This is the projection going forward. So take a week and think about all this and then come back and we'll vote. So they would vote. After all, you had a week or a month or however long they took, and the votes would be like 60-40 or something like that. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. If everyone here is led by the Holy Spirit, why? It's like really. If the whole purpose is to go back home and pray and talk to God about what He wants for this church, why are these votes so close? It's like I mean, you're telling me that 40% of this church is not right with God? That's what you're telling me? Or 60% of this church is not right with God? I mean, either way, it doesn't make any sense. Like if we are all being led by the Holy Spirit, we should all have resounding. You should have like 90-10 votes every single time. Say what?
It should be unanimous.
Yeah.
This is the Holy Spirit speaking to everyone, right?
Yeah. That never made sense. Like there was just stuff that just fell apart immediately. And the questions. Go ahead.
Are you familiar with the idea in the Bible of casting lots?
Oh my God, casting lots. That one, holy shit.
So I almost ran away from home when I was a teenager to join the Mennonite church. I felt they had a more consistent approach to the Bible. Like a lot of these inconsistencies that bothered me in the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church I was a part of, the Mennonites seemed to be getting right. Like they really were following all the rules. Like they did, for example, foot washing, which as an ordinance, just like Lord's Supper was for us. And a lot of other things, like the head coverings. I'm like, that was a passage I couldn't get past when I was reading about that. I'm like, I feel like this is a command for today. Like what? So anyways, I went to several of their church services, and they don't take votes. At least at the one I went to, they cast lots.
Really? I
Yes.
never. Oh wow.
Because that is, and I'm like, that makes so much
It
sense.
does.
Yeah, so they would they use the hymnal, and I forget if they turn to a certain page number, or they put pieces of paper in, and like whichever one you turn to. Like I remember one time it was over, like I think maybe one of 3 families would be sent to like the mission field or something, like a very big, serious decision, right? And they cast lots for it, and that's how the Holy Spirit would direct them. And I'm like, that is biblical.
It is. It is.
Thank you. Okay,
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. I never. How did the thing with the hymnal work? How did they do that?
I don't remember exactly if it was like, I think they took pieces of paper and wrote each family's name on one piece of paper and put them in different parts in the hymnal, and then whichever one they opened to, that was the family that went to the mission field.
All right. So yeah, in the Bible, for those of you who are unaware, they did the casting lots things quite often, because listen, if you actually do believe in like the supremacy of God, he's omnipotent and all-knowing and all-powerful, that makes total sense, because there's nothing random from him. Like I don't know what the casting lots exactly the process. It's like rolling dice basically. Like whatever it lands on, and that's the decision. Like they did that for Jonah, in the story of Jonah. Whenever a storm happened, they're like, okay, this is clearly not just some natural occurrence. This storm must be supernatural, and someone here must be the one to blame. They cast lots, and of course God controls it, so God let them know, yes, it's Jonah. And they cast lots, I'm pretty sure, to pick the replacement for Judas in the book of Acts. I think you're
right. I forgot about that. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and it's funny with that story too, because the guy who replaced Judas as the 12th disciple was a guy named Matthias. And I remember people talking a lot how, well, listen, clearly the 11 made a mistake here. They shouldn't have done this, because if they would have waited, they would have known Paul was the 12th apostle. Mm-hmm. I thought, okay, well, hold on. First off, how do you know that was a mistake? And if they're casting lots, you think God would have fucked it up. Like, because God controls the lots. Like, or God would have, like, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit. They should have, I don't know. It's like, none of it made any goddamn sense at all. The science thing was, I think, one of the first major moves for me, because I don't know if I told you about this.
Really? Not for me. I held on to the science for so long.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. No, for me, the thing I think that really, so like I had those doubts, but mostly I was like, oh, I think this might not be the right version of Christianity, I think was more what I was feeling. Because of course, the idea of Christianity not being real was so like mind shattering. And yeah, like I couldn't really fathom that. But when I got divorced, or like when I was going through my marriage and like the things leading up to my divorce, and then like when I chose to get divorced, it's like I'm choosing to go against what the Bible says I'm supposed to do. So I'm saying I know better than God what I should do with my life. If I really believe that, like, what does that mean for me, But like the science stuff, I believe that for a long time, because that's what I was taught, like very carefully, like the firmament and like the hyperbaric chamber, the worldwide flood, and like evolution isn't real, and like all these like arguments about how like this isn't. And I never, because Bible college, none of those beliefs were challenged. Grad school, I'm a music major. I'm not taking any science classes, in grad school. Like, and it wasn't that interesting to me to study. And it really was with, I guess, like YouTube and TikTok, like only in recent years that I'm like, oh shit, I really can't believe in the flood anymore. I really can't believe in creation anymore. Like that retrograde virus thing that you have.
Endogenous retroviruses. Yeah.
That was the thing. I saw a TikTok about that from someone else, but that when I heard that was the final straw for me. And I was like, oh, I can't get past that. I have to believe this now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think the Bible way better. It's so much more beautiful and creative and interesting.
It's more romantic, The flood, I remember asking a lot of questions about that as a kid. The flood really was a hard one for me to swallow. It just it was absurd. It was absurd. I
That's
mean,
why you have to have faith, TJ.
well, I know, but like no one could explain like the animals, like just like every animal just happened to live around Noah. Like I thought, like, how did that happen? And then you know what's interesting about this? So I'm going to be doing a live with another creator in a couple of weeks, maybe next week, and she brought up something that I actually never noticed before. That whenever they talk about the flood story, they always say, you know, you have the story where God tells Noah about the flood. Noah, you know, is telling everyone about the flood. Everyone's making fun of him, building the ark and everything. And if only they would have listened to Noah, they'd be fine. That is not in the Bible anywhere. Like God tells Noah to build the ark. He builds it. It mentions nothing about Noah telling a soul about the ark, about people mocking him about it. It's just build the ark. And in fact, God says, I'm going to save you and your family. The other human beings never factor into this, not one time. So,
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's not there.
Didn't they was preaching for 140 years?
I don't remember.
The Bible?
Well, I'll check on that. But from what I remember, I was like, man, I thought that
was what it said.
Yeah, it's like it's like he's just building the ark. It's this wild shit. And but yeah, the ark was a weird story to me. And honestly, the part that really was difficult was afterward, where you have these animals that have to repopulate when there's only 2 of each. And how does this work? And some of them eat meat. Oh, and also you know what? You remember Kent Hovind, I'm sure, like his videos and stuff. And he would talk about how
loved him.
Huh?
Loved him.
Oh God.
Because he gave me reasons I could believe in everything.
Yeah. And the thing that they would talk about back then is that, well, there was no problem because before the flood, animals were vegetarians. Like they all ate plants or something. Or maybe it was like, yeah, they would say that. And so, or at least before the fall, everything was a vegetarian. And
maybe the animals could talk too. I heard that.
Well, the Bible says that. They're like,
because Eve wasn't surprised when the serpent spoke to her.
Eve had no surprise at all when the snake talked to her, none whatsoever. And I'm sure you know this one, but
that's so much nicer to believe than evolution. Evolution is so boring. I don't believe in it.
Is that the Bible never says the snake was Satan. That's just something we added on there. Like that's just like it's like a lore. But no, it was just a talking snake. Like that's it. Because it says, and the Bible actually kind of points this out too. It's like it says that the serpent was more subtle than any other creature. So it's like, yeah, snakes are just sneaky and has nothing really to do with Satan whatsoever. And even the character of Satan, we're going deep into this now, but like the character of Satan has been created over time too, because like the word Satan is actually a title, not a name. It's like the accuser,
like a lawyer, kind of, an adversary. I think.
And which explains why Satan is in heaven, why he's making bets with God. Another thing too, why would anyone make a bet with an almighty, all-powerful God? Why? Like, why bother arguing with this guy whatsoever? Like, if the angels are smarter than us, why would they do that? And also, why would Satan rebel against an all-powerful, all-knowing God? Like, Satan's smarter than us. He knows like what omnipotence means. So it's like, okay, well, look, I may want to be like God, but he's the big guy. What am I going to do? And it also destroys this idea, because you ever like, listen, like we have all these questions about God and he never shows up to like verify this stuff. People just argue amongst themselves and there's no resolution of this. Why doesn't he just show up and solve all this? And this is the answer I'm sure you got, because everyone gets it. Well, look, you know, if God showed up, that would violate our free will. And, you know, that wouldn't be faith and everything. And I said, oh, hold on. And then everyone would just believe. It wouldn't be any work. It's like, hold on, Satan knew God was real. Satan worked with the guy, and he still rebelled. So you're telling me people can't? Why do they get that opportunity as angels, but we don't as people? None of it made any sense at all. And it started, like you said, everything starts cascading kind of down from there. And eventually, my breaking point was actually studying the construction of the New Testament and how it was just people, you know, it was just, there was nothing magical about it. And no one pretends that there was. It was just this council that decided, like, I think in 8300, somewhere around the Council of Hippo, like, okay, this canon of the New Testament amongst a dozen other ones, these are the books that are the actual words of God. Like people with no more.
Way later, it's like, oh, just kidding. The Apocrypha is not really God's word. So
that's
all the Christians who believe that for all that time, it's not real anymore.
That's another thing too, is that there's no such thing as the Bible. There isn't. There isn't, because the Bible that Catholics use is slightly different than the one that Protestants use, which is different than the one that Coptic Christians use, which is different than the one that Eastern Orthodox Christians use. There's no like they're mostly the same. But listen, that's not good enough. This is either the word of God
This
or
is
not.
God's word.
Exactly. There's no room for error
And
here.
every jot and tittle is inspired.
Yeah. The more you look into this, the less sense it makes, and so that's why I went to Dr. Saxon once, and I asked him about this. Is a question.
I love Dr. Saxon. I
I
remember
like him too.
Yeah.
And I asked him this question, like I'm sure it's like everyone gets, because it's like, okay, about the salvation thing. So, I was bothered by the fact that, Jesus died 2,000 years ago, and he said, go ye in all the world and preach to God, which is actually a verse that was like conclusively added way later, like that, which is like I in the book, and funny, they don't even hide this. If you read just a standard Bible, like a King James, otherwise, like the last few verses of the book of Mark, they all have an asterisk on there saying, just so you know, this is only found in later text, so it might not be. So, okay, why are we keeping this in here? But anyway, Jesus gives the Great Commission, and not once does he say, hey, by the way, there are 2 whole continents out there that you guys don't know about. All right. And, there are millions of people there. So, start working on that naval technology so you can get this good word to them so they don't spend the next 1,500 years dying and going to hell. Like, if we really want to spread this message, that's kind of an important message for Jesus Christ to leave out, and not tell anyone. It's almost like he didn't know. It's almost like he didn't know they were there. And
they were all brown. It didn't matter.
They didn't matter. Yeah. And so
we don't need them in heaven.
Yeah. And so that really bothered me. And I remember talking to Dr. Saxon about it. And plus, it's the same question we have with others. Like, what about people who live their whole lives and never hear a word about it? And you had 2 different answers on this. The first answer was a lot more rare in our community. And one answer, like, well, if you never know, you can't be punished and God won't send you to hell. In our community, they were not nearly as forgiving. It's like, nope. Going to hell too. And I was like, okay, how is that possible? Like, how is that fair? And then he pointed to the verse in the book of Romans where it says that it's the look at the trees argument, that, you can see the world, you see the complexity of life. And so you are without excuse for, not figuring out that there's a God. And I said, okay, all right, I can see that. But you figuring out that God is real is not the same thing as knowing there's a God that's real. It is this specific God. This God sent his son
to die on the cross for you.
Yeah. How are you supposed to figure that out without anyone telling you about it? And of course,
because missionary airplanes will crash in the dark jungle in Africa when those people have questions. Yes. God always makes a way.
Yes, that's what they would say. They said it all the time. It's like, well, listen, if anyone really wanted to know, God would send someone. And that's when I would retort with, you're telling me that no one in 1,500 years in North and South America, not one human being, it's like, you have to be insane.
They were vessels created for dishonor.
Yeah, it's like, you have to be insane to believe that. And so, like, the soteriology aspect of it really started crumbling along with everything else, and it kind of just collapsed. So it's traumatic. Like, we can joke and laugh about it, but like, it's serious. I know you said that you haven't like told everybody about it, which I understand. I didn't tell my family about it for nearly a decade and stuff. And I wanted to ask about the science thing. Is interesting to me because I do remember you talking about the evolution thing, because I don't know, I love science stuff and everything. So the fact that these ancient fables people were taking as science, it's like, oh, come on, get the fuck out of here. Like, I would just roll my eyes at this. Now there's a passage, I don't know if you know this one, but there's a passage in the Bible where Jacob is working for Laban, and the sheep,
the branches in the water.
So the basic
I thought that was real. I thought you could probably do that. I always thought that was a real thing that you could probably do now. I'm like, why don't people do that? I didn't realize.
I gotta say, I never thought that was real. I never say that part.
No, I totally did. I'm like, why doesn't every rancher do this? What a great idea.
Yeah,
like some kind of scientific reason, like that kind of wood being in the water somehow like affected. I didn't realize
how you look. Yeah, it is weird too, because with it, this is kind of off topic here, but with genetics and inherited traits, a lot of the stuff that we just take for granted, you have to realize people didn't know until very recently. Even with like evolution. So the idea of evolution existed before Darwin. Darwin was not the one who came up with the idea of evolution, but Darwinian evolution in particular is his because there were other theories of evolution that like Lamarckian evolution, which basically taught that if you did something enough in your life, your kid would end up with that trait. So like if you kept reaching for like high fruit or something, that your kid would be born with longer arms and shit like that. Like no one knew how the shit worked. It's weird that it just seems like common sense to us. But another example of this is just like drinking dirty water makes you sick. That wasn't like a globally accepted fact until something like 1904, like insanely recent. There was like there's a guy, I forget his name, I think his name was John Snow, and he was the scientist in England, I think, and he was looking at outbreaks of cholera. And he noticed that the people who, like, he looked at a map. He had like cases of cholera charted. I think it was, or maybe dysentery, I forget, but charted on a map. And he noticed that there was a huge concentration of people who got sick around like the public water spout that people went to like pump water for their houses. A huge concentration of that. And then out in the further part of the community where most of the people got there, like drank beer more than water, they didn't have nearly as much. And he says, I think this is in the water. And he was laughed out of the community. Like they thought this guy, look at this fucking nerd, this insane shit. It was like 30 years before people were like, oh my God, he's right. And that just seems obvious to us. Yeah, don't drink the doo-doo water. Maybe you'll be healthier for that. And they thought that the sickness, and this I actually do understand, they thought the sickness came from smelling it. Mm-hmm. So like that's why the plague doctors had those weird
something like that.
Say what? The miasma. Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah, you're right. And that's why the plague doctors had those weird beaks.
Yeah,
they had, it was like stuff with potpourri to keep the smell. And I get why people would think that, because when you smell something horrible, you vomit. Like it makes you feel bad. So I get why they thought that. But man, yeah, like
there really are airborne pathogens.
So and there are. That's true. Totally. Yeah. They're not completely wrong. Yeah. But yeah, wow. Yeah, you're just drinking gross water. But all right. So I want to get real quick. So I don't know about you, but my break from like religious extremism directly affected my political views. Like after I left, I was never like I was a Republican, but I was never like for example, there's no universe in which I would have been a Trump supporter. Zero chance, anything like that. But I believe in trickle down.
Good for you. That's wonderful.
I thought about
I'm
this.
impressed by that too. Like,
well, listen, I remember
the same. I really wish I'm so embarrassed that I can't say that.
So I remember, I was a Republican probably into like the early Obama years is when I really started, because I was always like a light Republican anyway. But I always wondered like when the line would be. There is no chance in hell I would have ever, even if I was still a conservative, I couldn't have voted for Trump. I couldn't vote for someone who was that much dumber than me. There's no way I would have done that. I know I would have done that. And so, but I realized that a lot of my political views were a direct outgrowth of my conservative Christian views, and that like when I looked at the data, it stopped making sense. So how did that work for you? Like when did your political reformation happen? I
would say for me, my political beliefs changed in two pieces. Mm-hmm. The thing that kept me holding on to being a Republican was abortion. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get past like, okay, if you murder a pregnant person, you're committing double murder. Mm-hmm. So if a fetus is alive and can be murdered, then it's a person.
Right.
If it's a person, it's wrong to murder the person. Like I can't get past that. Like I couldn't, and like I wanted to. Yeah. Honestly, I'm like I would really like to think that there could be times when it could be okay, because like that means there can't be an exception. Mm-hmm. Like that means if I have an ectopic pregnancy, like I'm going to have to die. That's the only choice that is open to me, which seems awful.
Right. Yeah.
But like I couldn't get my mind around the logic of that. And so I just could not vote for a Democrat because they tend to be pro-choice. So I voted Republican, straight ticket my whole life, all the way till 2016. I voted for Trump, much to my shame. I'm so sorry, world. I'm so sorry. Yeah, that's one of my biggest regrets. Well, I guess not really, because it's not like he won the popular vote. But so my vote probably didn't matter. But so then there was the Trump presidency. And oh, that was hard to watch. And it was really hard to watch the Republican reaction to the Trump presidency as well. And seeing that, I was just like, I can't vote for this guy. Like, I can't. Like the things he did and said towards women, towards racial minorities, towards people with disabilities, even towards like military veterans, and just like terrible person. And like you say, an idiot, which I was not a fan of either, but like that wasn't enough of a reason not to vote for him for me. Compared to Hillary Clinton, because she believed in murdering babies.
Of course, yeah.
So I can't, no matter what, it's like you can't trump that. That level of badness, murdering babies. Like I just couldn't. So, but when the next election came, I'm like, I have to vote for Biden. I don't care. Like I can't vote for Trump again. I can't. But I still believed in abortion, which made me still feel like, I guess I'm kind of a Republican. I don't know what to do about this. And then I heard the, I think it's called sometimes the cellist argument or the violinist argument, which you can Google. But that argument, that convinced me. I was like, you can't be compelled to keep another person alive, even if you're the only person who can keep that person alive.
Right.
You can't be compelled to use your body to keep another person alive. They don't have a right to your body.
Right.
And I was like, okay, that logic works for me. I'm convinced. And now I don't have to believe in being pro-life anymore. Like, not in the way. I mean, and that's the thing too about the abortion stuff. It's so skewed the way it's taught. Like, I really think I kind of was believing what I was taught, which was, people who believe in pro-choice, they love getting abortions.
They love it. Yeah.
They just want to get abortions all the time for fun. It's just like fun to them. They enjoy it. And like the doctors who are like doing these abortions, it's like fun to them to rip these babies' bodies apart.
Yeah.
And like they think it's great because they hate children and like all the, and it's like, oh, that's not what this is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't realize the nuance and the reality of who is getting abortions and why and when, and I didn't really, and I'd never had a baby before. Like now that I've had a baby, I realize like how long it can take to realize that you are pregnant. I didn't realize that, like so many reasons. So
yeah.
So I mean, really, it's been within the last. That has to have been within like the last year that the abortion thing fell away, and that was kind of like the last holdout for me, because that idea of like murdering babies, that's a hard one.
It's visceral. Yeah.
To be okay with for me. But like the whole political economic issues, like with capitalism, that like made a lot of sense to me right away, and like things like social safety nets or
you mean handouts for lazy people? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that. And like human rights violations and all of those economic issues, those made a lot of sense to me like way sooner. But I couldn't have really said, oh, I'm not that I'm saying I am now, but I could not have said that I was a liberal.
Yeah. The abortion one's in because it is like, it's also like the way it's presented and the way that they tell you how abortion works on the pro-life side is that they put in your mind that there's like a 7-month fetus that they're gonna go in there and just
looks like a baby.
Yeah, just cutting the ribbons and pulling it out. It's like like
its brains out with a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, it's
after
like
they slice its neck. Well, the rest of its body has already been delivered.
It's
what? No, I'm not in favor of that.
Right. It's like cartoon levels of evil and shit. When most abortions, like 90, are like pills you take that gets rid of. That's it. I mean, it's none of it's like, and then they don't put into context like that. One thing they bring up a lot is like these people support abortion up until the moment of birth, as if there are people out there who are pregnant for 10 months and then the day before are like, yep, abort this child. It's like, folks, that doesn't happen, and it would never happen. Like if you went to the doctor and you're in your 9th month or 10th month of pregnancy, is like, I don't want to be pregnant anymore. They're just the baby's got to come out one way or the other. They're just gonna take the baby out. They're not gonna kill it. Or why would they do that? Like that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like the baby can survive outside the womb at that point. They would just deliver the baby. They would induce the pregnancy, see whatever. The baby's gonna come out one way or the other. They're not just gonna murder this thing. It's like that's not how this shit works. Like the point is to no longer be pregnant. The point isn't necessarily to murder the fetus. Like that's just not. But that's what they tell people is like, yeah, you can just decide. Like, no, that's definitely illegal everywhere. Always has been. So that's interesting, and I'm always interested to see in which changes first for people, the political or the religious, because it's not always that way. A lot of people change politically first and then end up changing religiously. And so I'll end with this question right here: is where do you how would you describe your spiritual or religious beliefs these days? Because this question is all over the map when I ask people. Like there are people. I'll give mine first. That whenever I found out about the construction of the New Testament, I realized that I couldn't in good conscience. I wasn't convinced. I was no longer convinced that this was the word of God because I had no reason to believe it. So I still believed in some sort of, prime mover, some sort of divine artificer, like someone that got the ball rolling on this. But I couldn't call myself a Christian anymore. And I kind of spent a long time as like a deist / pantheist. I was just trying to find some way to explain why there's something instead of nothing. That's kind of where I was for a long, long time. And then I believed that there was some sort of deity. I didn't believe that it answered prayers. I didn't believe that, it cared, what I ate, what I wore, who I fucked, and in what position. Like, I didn't believe it cared anything about that. I certainly didn't think that he had something built for me after I died. And after a while, I was like, okay, well, what's the difference between that deity and one that doesn't exist? Turns out not much. Turns out not much at all. And so that's when I kind of realized that I'm an atheist. And I'm sure there might be a God, but I don't know. I have no reason to believe it. And so that's where I found myself. But that was over like a 10-year process or whatever. So I'm interested to see where people are in this because there's people all over the map. How about you?
Well, I would say as far as religion is concerned, I feel like all religion is toxic and the world would be a much better place without any religion at all. I think it's damaging and has very little value in my opinion. But you're asking like, what do I believe about God?
Oh yeah, if you have any beliefs at all, how would you describe them?
I feel conflicted still. I think probably if I had to put a label, agnostic atheist is probably like, I guess, I don't know. Because like, I feel frustrated when I try to decide what I think about God because of what you said. It's like, okay, well, but we're here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very weird.
Like, this happened somehow. Something can't come from nothing. Like all of those arguments that you hear growing up about in favor of God. It's like, well, yeah, that's why people believe in God and religion. It's like something. Yeah. There's some cause to all of this. But as far as like the deities that are depicted in any religion in the world, I don't, ascribe to any of those depictions as being true or real.
Yeah.
I think they're all made up, to try to explain natural phenomena that we just can't explain, unfortunately, which is so incredibly frustrating.
It is like we are naturally curious creatures, and not having an answer for something is incredibly frustrating. Yeah. And I get it. Cause like if you lived like 1,000 years ago and then the ground starts shaking and breaking apart and you're like,
eclipse.
Or an eclipse. It's like, whoa, what happened here? And it's like, okay, it was some demon, some spirit, some god. It's like, all right, that makes sense to me. And then the other guy is like, I don't know. It's like, okay, what do you mean you don't know? Like, no, we need an answer here. And that's what we default to. Like we default to it all the time. Like Isaac Newton, when he came up with like his gravitational theories and everything, he wrote, there were some things he couldn't explain about the rotation of the planets, like why, like he could explain the gravity and everything, but why they moved at all, he didn't have an answer. And he wrote something like, maybe angels are involved. Like, okay, this is like, even Isaac fucking Newton. Like, it's like, that's what we just default to. Like, maybe there's something else out there for this. And whenever we don't have an answer, it's very easy to just say, well, it was God. And it's not a lot of times. we just don't know. And so, yeah, I'm always interested to see where people end up there. But so anyway, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Heather, for taking time out of your day to come talk with me about this. This is I really enjoy the opportunity to get to discuss this stuff with people who come from a similar background that I happen to see where they've ended up. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the discussion. It's very interesting to hear, all the different perspectives.
It is.
But a little different.
It's fantastic. Thanks a lot. All right. Love, peace, chicken grease.
Bye-bye.